Back once again, only on it's Last Call. Last Call to the alcohol, only on the lastcallpodcast.com. And joining me is once again, he is taking some time off from working on his 2027 draft, working for the draft professors, getting ready to cover the Jets, which he will have some maybe anger issues on this topic. So we'll get to that when it happens. I give you the college football insider, aficionado, and draft expert from the draft professors. I give you it's Anthony Russo. So Anthony, let's jump right into this because we got a lot to talk about with our Big Ten college football preview. Thank God it's here. So let's jump right into it. Fighting Illini. Last year they were bit of a surprise. 9-4, 5-4 in the Big Ten. Brent Bielema rode Luke Altmaier all the way to a bowl game, and now, you only have three returners on offense. Caitlin Hauser has come over from East Carolina, and Caden Fagan is probably their best weapon. How does this offense look, and how tough is it right now when you're scouting Illini to figure out, okay, what's their identity? Because they'll have new running backs, new quarterback, brand new offensive line, and we're not sure how good their wide receiver room is.
Yeah, it's interesting because we did for the Draft Professor podcast, we actually did a Illinois team preview. It was one of the ones that I was a part of, and I think it's interesting because I think Caden Hauser is an upgrade from Luke Altmaier, just in terms of what he brings you physically. I think he has a better arm. I think he's a little more mobile. I wouldn't call him a crazy scrambler, but I think he's better than Altmaier. But you kind of alluded to it. It kind of feels like the rest of the team is either just stagnant from what it was last year or a bit of a downgrade. I look at the pass rush, losing Gabe Akis. I don't really think they have a player, that is that talented on their defensive line this year. I think the secondary is still very good. With I'm a big Xavier Scott fan, and you got guys like Juice Clark and Matthew Bailey on the back end. But yeah, and in terms of weapons, I don't really, the receiving core, I don't think is really anything to write home about. Caden Fagan is making the transition over to tight end, which I think will be interesting to see. And I do think the offensive line is just, I'll say unproven, to keep it nice. Yeah, I listen. It's a Brett Bielema coach team. He knows what he's doing, and I think he can net a similar result in terms of what they did last year. I would say this is kind of like an 8-9 win team. If Caden Hauser plays at a very high level, maybe this is they can squeak out 10 wins. I don't think this is a playoff team by any means, especially in the Big Ten. But I'm a huge Caden Hauser fan. I think I might be the biggest Caden Hauser fan that is currently not an Illinois or ECU fan. So I have a lot of faith in him being able to elevate this roster. But at the end of the day, we're going to get into the big players of this conference. So I would expect probably like 8 wins from this Illinois team.
Let's talk about on defense the X factor, which is Aaron Henry left for Notre Dame, so Brent Bielema took the defense in a different unit. He's hired former Montana head coach Bobby Hawk to install a 3-3-5. I know when we were talking out there, you liked that the safeties Matthew Bailey and Xavier Scott are returning. You're high, and Justin Clark as a solid cornerback. Is this for a team that, as you said, Gabe Yakis is gone. They aren't returning anybody on the front seven. Is this something where it's like, all right, this is our strength, our secondary, and we'll just try to have as many, quick guys out there, and it's new. Nobody's seen a 3-3-5 yet, so hey, this should, give some teams like, all right, how do we attack this?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're Coach Bielema, you're Coach Hawk, I think you lean on your best players, and your best players, in my mind, on this defense are Xavier Scott, Matthew Bailey, and Juice Clark. I think they are, they're all returning starters. Xavier Scott was unfortunately hurt for most of last year, but I still think he's the most talented player. I was incredibly high on him in summer scouting last year. Um, and again, he got hurt, so I'm a little more down on him, but I still think he's incredibly talented, ball hawking kind of corner that can play inside and out. Um, so we'll see. Again, if there's no, if they don't get a semblance of a pass rush, I think any secondary would be exposed if you're not able to create pressure consistently up front. So that is going to be huge for them. But I do believe that the secondary, if given an opportunity, can hold its own against most of the wide receiver tandems they'll see in the Big Ten. I won't say all of them because there's one or two that I think are a little too talented, but this is a good. It's the good unit. It's the best part of this Illinois team, I think.
You're high on Caitlin Hauser. I know that you are intrigued by Caden Fagan, who's, as you said, moving from running back, wide receiver to tight end. That Hudson Clement is back, Colin Dixon is back. Can they score enough though? I mean, when I know you've mentioned like, hey, Hauser is mobile enough where he's not going to be like Luke Altmaier and just be a statue. He can get around. So how does this team score points when, yeah, they have Brandon Anderson returning at right guard. They brought in Jake Renfro from Wisconsin at center, but it's still like, all right, well, rest of the offensive line, we have no idea if they are good enough. Is Christian Martin, good enough to start in the Big Ten? Like, how does this team score points?
Yeah, I do think offensive line is the biggest question mark on this team. Um, I like Brandon Henderson, the other guard who will start for them, but he is the only returning starter from last year. You mentioned the transfers that they're bringing in. I do think if the offensive line is able to perform well, I think they have talented running backs too. We didn't even mention Khalil Valentine and Aiden Laffery, who are two, I think, pretty impressive weapons in the backfield that Hauser can also sort of rely on, and then establishing the run and being able to work some play action in there. Again, I think Hauser can make those throws downfield and also can create with his legs, like you said, in a way that Altmaier just couldn't. That wasn't what he was asked to do, and that wasn't really his skill set. So it really will, as cliche as it sounds, it's really going to come down to the offensive line and what they're going to be able to create for both Hauser to protect him and the run game to be able to get established early in those games against a very competitive Big Ten opponents.
It's a bit of a oxymoron schedule. You look, it's like, oh crap, they're in trouble because they play at Ohio State September 26th. Oregon comes to October 24th. And then you look and it's like, wait a minute here. UAB, Duke, Southern Illinois to start the season. They also play at Michigan State, Purdue, at Maryland, at UCLA, at Northwestern. The best two teams after Ohio State and Oregon, you could argue, are Nebraska, which we'll get to them and they have questions, and Iowa, which solid team, but Iowa plays at home. Like, is there a world where everything gels and you're looking at the Illini and they're can't believe I'm saying this 7-2 in the Big Ten because everything comes together and they just win all these games that are 50-50 because they have the senior quarterback.
I certainly think there's a world. Yeah, I kind of already talked about it before too, but I think Brett Bielema is a top five coach in the conference, and I think I think he has a sort of ceiling, in terms of how much he's going to be able to do single handedly, but I also think he gives you a solid floor just as a coach in terms of what he's going to get out of his players and being able to win football games. And yeah, I would say Ohio State, Oregon, respectfully, are probably losses. Um, Outside of those two, I could there's not another game where I would say Illinois definitely loses. I think they could win each of these other games, again, it's really just going to come down to what we get, in the trenches from this Illinois team. And I do think there's a couple, there are some other Big Ten teams that they're going to face that I think will improve from last year. I look at like UCLA. Iowa's always a one of those competitive teams that kind of like Illinois is going to get at least 7, 8 wins on the year probably. Um, Duke was in the ACC title game, so like there's winnable games, there's losable games. I would be pretty shocked if Illinois is not at least above 500 by the time they get through the Big Ten schedule.
Last year, Indiana won the whole thing, and it was, you could argue, their offense was one of the big keys. We'll get to their offense because it's revamped and it still could be very good. Their defense, just when you thought, okay, they lost some guys, they went out and transfer portal. Oh, yeah, we'll kill A.J. Harris to play cornerback because D'Angelo Ponce is gone. Oh, you know what? We need two defensive ends. Let's get Toby Osanami from, you know, Kansas State and Chidi Obiazar to play defensive end. We have Tyreek Tucker, who's back. Elijah Hardy, Isaiah Jones, Mark Lindino. It's scary to think could this be the best defense in the Big Ten, considering once again Kurt Cignetti, mixed and matched, got his transfers, has a lot of his guys, and this defense doesn't seem to have like a weakness where it's like, well, we can exploit this, we can exploit that. Like, it's still a scary defense.
Yeah, I mean this is sort of the conundrum with Indiana, and I guess we really should learn our lesson after seeing them win a national championship. But I mean, I think if you just look at the names on paper, you would kind of have to say that Ohio State and Oregon's defenses are still more talented, just in terms of NFL draft prospects and in terms of you know upside and that kind of stuff. But I think Bryant Haynes is a hell of a defensive coordinator, and I'm actually like kind of stunned that he didn't get a head coaching job, and that might have just been his own personal choice. But I think he's a hell of a defensive coordinator, and there is talent on this unit. I look at guys like Jamari Sharp, who I'm a fan of, Amari Farrell on the back end. You mentioned Tyreek Tucker, Mario Landino is another interior D lineman that I think is gonna turn some heads this year. Um, Cignetti is obviously the best coach in college football, and I think he's also just the best team crafter that there is right now because he understands what he needs from his people, from his players, and he's able to get the most out of them with his very impressive coaching staff. So, would I look at this defense and say it's the best defense in the Big Ten? No, not in terms of the players themselves per se, but will I be surprised when we get to January and they were the best defense in college football statistically and just in game in and game out because of the way that they're coached and the play style and the mentality that they have? I can't be surprised because we've already seen how this works for Indiana.
How will the offense shape up? I guess is the big question. They brought in pieces. Like, all right, they lost, Elijah Surratt. Hey, Nick Marsh, you're coming over from Michigan State, and he's probably the most talented wide receiver in terms of like natural talent they've had in a long time. Hey, they lost, Fernando Mendoza. Well, no problem. Hey, Josh Hoover, come over from TCU, and he's more of a smaller but quicker quarterback. Turbo Richard, we need a running back. Come on in. They brought in Joel Bruner to replace the left guard. They still have Carter Smith, Drew Evans, and Bray Lynch. And oh yeah, Charlie Becker's returned. So how does this offense look? I mean, there's a lot of new pieces. It's still Kurt Cignetti's offense, and as we know, he demands perfection, and he's going to get it whether he has to drag these people to meet that hook or by crook.
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, as much as I I'm a big Omar Cooper fan, and obviously now he's a Jet, so I have to tell you that he's the greatest wide receiver, rookie wide receiver we've ever had. But I I think you have to admit that the duo of Nick Marsh and Charlie Becker is just better than the duo of Omar Cooper and Elijah Surratt from last year. Just in terms of again the talent, you mentioned Nick Marsh at Michigan State. I mean, just talk about being shackled by an offense that just could not feature him. I think the way that he is able to be featured for as talented as he is. So you look at those two. You mentioned Turbo Richard. I think he's a fun, exciting running back. I would also not be surprised if Kobe Martin is also a I don't want to say a featured role guy, but somebody that makes an impact and makes some big plays for the Hoosiers this year. And then look, it all just does come down to Josh Hoover, and I think you're a bigger fan of Josh Hoover than I am, and that's fine. And there's plenty of people who are bigger fans of Josh Hoover than I am. I just kind of question, what I just worry sometimes when what hits the fan, what we get out of him. But look, if he can, you know, direct the offense in the way that Fernando Mendoza was able to direct the offense and don't turn the ball over and get the ball to the big time playmakers that they have in Marsh and Becker and Richard and those guys. This offense can absolutely be, at the very least, it can be enough to make sure that this Indiana team is right back contending for a national championship. Again, I have a hard time just committing to the idea that they can repeat with the same exact formula and I believe a downgrade at the quarterback position. Um, but this should still be a very good and well coached unit.
Before we get to the outlook, that's the thing I want to ask you because as a draft scout, Indiana to you, I'm guessing this year, especially last year, made no sense. It's like okay, they're three-star recruits. Fernando Mendoza was when he came in, oh he's a zero-star recruit. This makes no sense. They should not be beating the Oregons, Ohio States, and Miami's. They have better talent. Is this where we forget the most important thing? Where yes, you natural talent's great, but the coaching, if you have great coaching, if you have this a mentality of us against the world, if you play smarter rather than harder, can that overcome a lot? Because they look at Indiana, that's always a question. Like, all right, yeah, we didn't think this person was good, and then we look at the end of the year, it's like, holy crap, they went undefeated. How the hell did this happen? So could this be another, more proof for you, Anthony Russo, that we are once again overlooking the talent and going, all right, yeah, Josh Hoover's and Nick Marsh isn't, Jonathan Smith, and then we forget, oh yeah, it's still Kurt Signetti, the cult of Signetti, and he, as he said, demands perfection.
Yeah, I mean, look, I said it before, I'll say it again. I believe Kurt Signetti is the best head coach in college football. I believe he has the best coaching staff put together in college football right now. And if you look at listen, if you look at Indiana last year, just purely in terms of who was drafted, obviously Fernando Mendoza was first overall, and you had Omar Cooper also in the first round. But outside of those two, it wasn't really. I mean, Pons, was a second round or two to the Jets, but it wasn't littered with draft prospects the way that we've seen other, the Georgia teams of the late 2010s, early 2020s, and Nick Saban's Alabama teams and Ohio State in the last couple years. Like it wasn't full of NFL guys. And even now, I even if Indiana goes on and wins another national championship, I don't think we're gonna have, a ton of NFL draft prospects, or at least like a ton of, top 50 and top 100 draft picks. So yeah, it really just it really the whole Indiana phenomenon hinges on Kurt Signetti, and he has proven in 2 years that he's that good that he can take a team that he's created to the top of the mountain. And the question now is just you were able to get there, are you able to stay there? And I just can't again commit to that, but I won't be surprised if Kurt Signetti makes me look stupid by the time we get to the national title game.
The schedule breaks early for them pretty well. It's North Texas, Howard, Western Kentucky University, Northwestern, all at home. Then at Rutgers, at Nebraska, and then it's, I guess we'll get our answers. It's Ohio State, October 17th, home in Indiana. Then they go to the Big House at Michigan, October 24th. Minnesota, USC are at home. Then at Washington, end the season with Purdue. How much does for them? Like how much is it? The season starts October 17th. That's when we'll figure out. Okay, yeah, they're getting another national championship, or yeah, there will be a step back. Well, not a big step back, but a small step back.
Yeah, I really do think it just boils down to can Indiana survive October? If Indiana beats Ohio State, which obviously having them at home is much more beneficial, and then going to the Big House the following week, if they win both of those games, I don't see a loss. I mean, like USC at home is more than winnable. I guess at Washington could be sneaky depending on how they are this year. Um, but we've seen Kurt Signetti able to handle West Coast road trips pretty easily. He gets his guys ready to go. So yeah, I really do think it's October. And honestly, even they can lose that Ohio State game and win out and still be a playoff team and still have a chance at a national title. So even losing that game won't be a season ender, so to speak. But it really does. If they lose both of those games, if they lose Ohio State and then lose at Michigan, that's back-to-back losses against at least two of I would say the top 4 or 5 Big Ten teams for this coming season. Then now you're starting to get into some dangerous territory in terms of where they stand in the playoffs. But yeah, that's the big hurdle. Every other part of the schedule is I don't think really anything to be concerned with.
All right, let's get to Iowa. There's, as they say, there's three things in life that are certain: death, taxes, and the Iowa Hawkeyes will play tough football, and you pray they can actually have a decent quarterback. That's been the story ever since Kirk Ferentz took over. And once again, that's the story right now, where in spring ball, it was Hank Brown, Jeremy Hecklinski were contesting for the starting quarterback job, and then, well, depending on the day, it's either Hecklinski or Brown. Nobody's sure. Let's get to the good news. The defense looks like, again, it has some nice pieces, led by Zach Lutmer, Deshaun Lee at cornerback, linebacker Jade Montgomery, and as Will Thomas has said, Iowa has a format. They have their guys. They know what they like. And when you look at this defense, once again, Anthony, like how much do you look at the Iowa defense and go, it's going to be physical. They're going to punch you in the face, and they're going to make teams just play really grinded out, ugly football.
I mean, yeah, this is I think sort of similar to the idea of the Brett Bielema Illinois kind of team where you know exactly what you're gonna get, and I don't, this is another one of those. I don't look at the roster and think this is a massively talented team. It's not full of NFL draft prospects by in that regard, but there's good players. There's well coached players. You mentioned Lutmer and Deshaun Lee. They're I think probably the two best players on this defense, and so the secondary will need to show up and create turnovers and make some plays. Um, Jose Espinosa, I think, is someone, or excuse me, Epinesa is somebody to watch. He's only a redshirt freshman, but he's a name that I've heard as a potential, if not a breakout guy this year, I think somebody that we're going to be talking about as a draft potential prospect in the next couple of years. Um, but there's good players. I also like the addition of Kamari Brown, the transfer that they have on the defensive line from Elon. We'll see. Obviously, he's going to have to make the jump in competition, but he's somebody that can get after the quarterback as well. So we'll see. Again, it sounds simplistic, but there's gonna be a lot of 17-13 games and a lot of 10-9 games and a lot of like 13-10 like that. That's gonna be I get the feeling that's gonna be the score in a lot of these Iowa games that we're gonna see this year. And Kirk Ferentz and his guys know how to win those kinds of games. So I think, yeah, the defense is good enough to keep them in it, and the coaching staff is good enough to keep them in just about any football game.
This offense is going to drive people nuts, like always, over in Des Moines, Iowa. The good news is the offensive line looks solid. Trevor Locke and Cade Piper are returning, both of them. All Big Ten, you know, they were part of the best offensive line. You have a solid running back in Kamari Moulton. Tight end DJ Vonahey proved to be a former walk on who led the team with 434 receiving yards, 3 touchdown catches, and then you look at the skill positions at wide receiver and quarterback and go, oh boy, it's gonna get ugly. Does anything impress you when you're scouting Iowa's offensive talent, like either the quarterbacks, the wide receiver room, or is this like, okay, it's gonna be 3 yards, a cloud of dust, and again, as you said, just grind it out 10-9, 13 to 10 games, and people are going, oh my god, this is a tractor pull all over again for the 25th time.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way that Iowa is going to score and therefore win football games this season is their offensive line and their ground game. I am a big fan of both Trevor Locke and Cade Piper. Yeah, I'll just say on my big board right now, they are both top 35 players for my 2027 draft board. So I think very highly of them. I think they're both very talented blockers. And you mentioned Kamari Moulton. I would also throw in London Phillips Jr., who's a transfer from South Dakota. That running back duo is, I think, up there in terms of Big Ten running back tandems. They're both very talented. Kamari Moulton was somebody that caught my eye last year, and I look forward to seeing him get better. And DJ Vonneman also he's going to be I think the primary receiving option. Um, I mean, this is an Iowa team, right? That the tight end kind of has to be good. That's sort of the requirement for any Hawkeyes team. Um, yeah, like I said, I think the way that they're going to score and win is run the football, let this offensive line control the line of scrimmage, move people, and get out in space, and set up big explosive plays that way. You mentioned the quarterback battle before too. I haven't really gotten a sense that one between Hecklinski and Brown, that one has a real big leg up on the other, and I don't really know if it matters all that much. I don't think the quarterback position is going to be the strength of this team. As I can't say that that's the first time I've ever said that about an Iowa team. Um, so yeah, if this Iowa team is going to be successful, it's going to be the offensive line creating big holes in the run game that Kamari Moulton and London Phillips Jr. can exploit, and then finding ways to let DJ Vonnegut kind of take over in the passing game.
Season starts off easy a bit. Northern Iowa, Iowa State, Northern Iowa, sorry, Northern Illinois, Iowa State, Northern Iowa. First three games all at home, and then it's the 4 games of death. I like to call it. It's September 26th at Michigan, October 3rd. Ohio State comes to town, and then October 10th, October 24th at Washington, at Minnesota. It gets easier afterwards with Wisconsin at Northwestern, Purdue at Illinois, Nebraska, but still, those 4 games, like, could this be the year that Iowa has a losing record simply because they don't have it? Other teams will put 14 to 20 points on the board and they can't score. Like, you aren't going to be able to hold Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, Minnesota to under 14 points. That's just, I think, asking too much.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'll be honest, I would probably even say the same thing about Washington too. That I just don't know if Iowa is talented enough to hang with them. Um, but yeah, I think I think Michigan is a team that I think they'll lose to. I think Ohio State is a loss, and Washington's probably a loss. If they yeah, I mean they could find themselves below 500 as as again I kind of started this whole thing by saying Kirk Ferentz kind of gives you that floor, so to speak, and that standard. But the reality is he is probably very close to retirement. I know he's under contract through 2029, I believe. Um, so I'm not saying necessarily he's going to retire this year, but he's probably on his way out, and again, the hope is that they can win. I would look at the back half of this schedule. Um, at home against Wisconsin, at Northwestern, home against Purdue, at Illinois, and home against Nebraska. And I think that could be where Iowa wins. I mean, if not four, maybe even five, maybe even all five, but I would probably say they win three or four of those games, and can find a way to kind of salvage the season, so to speak. But yeah, I don't I think that rough patch in the middle is kind of gonna take them out of legitimate, any sort of legitimate contention in the Big Ten.
If Indiana's a team you look and go, talent doesn't match the success because they're doing more of what they have. Maryland's the opposite. I mean, you look at Maryland, and I know you're high in terms of just the athleticism of Malik Washington. He is a guy who comes out. He looks like he came out of a quarterback lab. He is 6'5", 231, strong arm, athletic. They have DeJuan Williams back at running back. They have an offensive line which has experience led by Ranthel Perry and Michael Hershey. They have Isaiah Wright, at right tackle. Wide receiver room has some talent with, as I said, Dorian Fleming. They brought in transfers Nareem Abdul Rahim Gladding from Old Dominion, Chris Durr Jr. from Wyoming. Why did this team only win 1 game last year in the Big Ten? Why? What is it about Maryland? You look and go, God, they have talent, but it's just they can't put it together.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say first off, Malik Washington is incredibly talented, a physical marvel. 6'5", 230. He's got a rocket arm, and he's an athletic player. So like, I would say maybe more than obviously quarterback is important for every team, but I think a lot of Maryland's success is going to hinge on Malik Washington and what he's able to get out of his pass catchers, and just the overall offense that he's going to be able to create. I think the reason that Maryland struggled last year, among other things, was just he was a true freshman and he played for all the great flashes and success that he had. He also was a true freshman and he played like it at times. So I expect him to get better. I expect him to, have a better understanding of the offense and, and continue his development. I could see him having a big year. I think overall this is still, a team lacking talent. I think the offensive line is a good unit, I will say. I like the addition of Talek Lockett from Texas State to fill one of those guard spots. Michael Hershey, you talked about, is a good center, and Latrell Perry is a solid left tackle to have. So I actually think he can be well protected. It's going to come down to being able to read the field and find his receivers downfield. That's going to drive, how much offensive output we get from Maryland this year. Do I expect them to be a big time, playoff, kind of sneaky team like that? No. Um, if they don't get, I will say too, if they don't finish over 500, I think Mike Loxley's probably gone. This is probably a make or break season for him as their head coach. Um, so they better hope they do well for his sake. But this is a team that I think can, if they pull off like an upset somewhere along the line, or maybe they win one or two games that we don't necessarily think they can win, I wouldn't be too surprised by that.
On defense, they got two freshman All Americans and Sidney Stewart and Zahir Mathis returning. They have Zion Eli, a four-star recruit who many people say is probably the highest rated recruit they've ever had on defense. The middle, you like big guys? Well, hey, they've got 300 pounders Ethan Thomas and Levon Johnson. Uh, they have Dante Joyner and Jamar Glasker as draft day prospects in the secondary. They brought in, of course, from the transfer portal, Amari Jackson from Boston College. Levanian Scruggs returns. Daniel Wingate, the middle linebacker, like all Big Ten, kind of player and 2-year starter. Again, you look at it's like they have talent. It can, I guess, here for this question. All right, they're older. Can Ted Monachino, a defensive coordinator, finally figure out, okay, how can I translate talent to play, to good defensive play?
Yeah, I this defense is full of just athletes. You mentioned most of them, but Sidney Stewart and Zahir Mathis are two guys that are really, I think they have NFL futures. Um, Both of them as true freshmen last year combined for 13 sacks. So they are able to get after the quarterback and get into the backfield. Um, you mentioned too Daniel Wingate. He was a favorite of mine last year. I thought potentially he could come out for the drafts, but he obviously went back to school. But he's another just really athletic player. This whole defense is we are going to be more athletic than you, and we are going to be able to make plays. That's sort of I think the mindset of this roster. Like you look, the funny thing too with them is like you look at their measurables. Like Zahir Mathis is 6'6", 222 listed. Daniel Wingate is 6'5", 230. So these are the interesting builds, so to speak. And again, they just come at you with such impressive athleticism. And it's a young unit overall. I mean, you have your seniors and like the Wingates and the Levain Scruggs, and the secondary is actually very experienced. But the first two guys I mentioned were true freshmen last year. So if they're able to build on that success and continue, developing and still be focal points of the defense, they could be very sneaky, really talented pass rushers in the Big Ten Conference. Which, if you're able to get after the quarterback, you can pretty much keep yourself in any football game. It doesn't matter who you're playing. I think Maryland has to hope that the three star freshmen from last year, Malik Washington, Sidney Stewart, and Zahir Mathis, all not only play as well as they did, but play better than they did. And if they all improve and if they all continue, on that kind of trajectory, then I think we could have a Maryland team that's making some noise in the conference.
As a Jets fan, I know you're like, oh, we need to fire Aaron Glenn. He's a horrible coach. I mean, we need to fire Aaron Glenn. He's horrible. Do we have to say that about Mike Locksley? And I get it. Look, he can recruit. He has brought in some homegrown talent, kept them there. He returns 71% of his, offensive production coming back. Again, though, 4-8, 1-8 in the Big Ten. You always get the sense that, if it's a close game, they're going to find a way to blow it. Like last year, started off hot, 4-0, and then lost to Washington at home by 4 points. They lost to Nebraska at home by 3 points. Lost at UCLA, by 3 points. They lost to the end of a game where it's like, okay, hey, we might be able to be bowl eligible. They lost at Michigan State by 10 points. These are all these games you're looking at going, man, play here, play there. We could have won. So is this just a team that, it's the flip side of Indiana. The talent's there, just they need to get rid of the coach.
Yeah, I look, Michael Oxley's been there. This is what I think his eighth season now. I think he's been there since 2019.
Yes.
So listen, you're right. He has recruited his ass off, brought in some talented guys. He brought in Malik Washington. He brought in Zahir Mathis. He brought in Sidney Stewart. All these great freshmen that I just talked about. He's absolutely done a great job there. And obviously, if Malik Washington, starts to emerge as we're not going to talk about him for this draft because he's not eligible. But if he ends the year as somebody that we're saying, oh, this is a first round pick in 2028, then Mike Locksley, I think, keeps his job no matter what their record is, frankly. But if Mike Washington or if Malik Washington doesn't quite take the step that we're hoping for, and they do go 4-8, 3-9 like that again, then I think you kind of just have to. I think you kind of just have to let him go. I know Maryland's not. I wouldn't call Maryland a football first school. I think they are still probably more of a basketball school, but you got to be able to. You got to win football games if you're in the Big Ten conference, and I don't think Loxley's done enough of that in recent years. And you don't want to waste this talent. If they do go, if they have a bad year, and you want to try to prevent Malik Washington from entering the portal and leaving Maryland, maybe you do try to go out and get somebody that could excite him and revitalize the program and bring a sense that they can win more games. So we'll see how it plays out, but I think Mike Locksley has to either win a lot of games and get them above 500 again and have a good year that way, or if maybe they don't win as many games, but Malik Washington is tearing it up and we see a true first round prospect, I think that could save him. But yeah, this very well could be his last season at Maryland.
All right, it's a new day in Michigan. There's no more Michigan man at coach. Some people, including my guy Best Ball Junkie, will say, "Thank God." That's like getting rid of all the convicts. That's a different story, different day. Kyle Whittingham is now your new head football coach over at Michigan, as we've seen here in the picture. He brought in a lot of his Utah guys, such as John Henry Daly, the pass rush stud from Utah. He brought over, of course, on offense, J.J. Buchanan and Jamie French, and stole Jamie French from Texas. They have, of course, Bryce Underwood. So let's ask the question: can Kyle Whittingham just alone be an upgrade, considering the last 2 years we saw with Sharon Moore and just that chaos sometimes it is Michigan?
Oh yeah, I he definitely can be an upgrade. I think Whittingham is or was a great hire. Um, what he was able to do at Utah, um, for all the years that he was there. He obviously knows. I think he knows how to establish culture and an identity. And I think he'll be able to do that at Michigan. I do think this is I wouldn't call this the most talented Michigan team we've ever seen, by any stretch of the imagination. Similar to Maryland, I think it's a lot of this is going to come down to what we get out of Bryce Underwood at the quarterback position. Um, and I don't feel as optimistic about Underwood as I do about Washington, just based on how each of them played last year. And obviously it was, I would say different circumstances and even different team expectations that I think played a factor in that too. Um, but no, I think Whittingham can absolutely get more out of this team than we got from Sharon Moore and all the chaos that surrounded him and just this program in general. Um, there's a lot of I think the big thing with Michigan is there's a lot of young this it's a young team. I don't think they have a single senior starting on offense, as it stands right now. Um, a lot of sophomores. I mentioned Bryce Underwood, but you look at they've got Andrew Marsh as their receiver and guys like JJ Buchanan in the slot. Blake Frazier is their left tackle. He's a sophomore. Andrew Sprague is their right tackle. He's a sophomore. Jordan Marshall, the running back, he's a sophomore. So like this is a young Michigan team that is now going to have a brand new head coach with a guy that didn't recruit them. Again, I trust Whittingham is going to be able to get a lot out of his players and be able to start implementing his philosophies and his schemes and things like that. Do I necessarily think that it's going to be like a 1 year turnaround and Michigan's going to come out, like a bat out of hell and go right back to winning a lot of big games in the Big Ten? I think we may have to wait on that. But if this Michigan team is going to be a threat, I think the defense can be a reason why they've got several playmakers on that side of the ball.
So let's talk the defense. They lost a lot of talent in the NFL draft, including three-fourths of their defensive line. They both their safeties. The good news is, as you said, Trey Pierce returns a defensive tackle, and he pairs with the huge size of Eno Etta, the other defensive tackle. As you said, John Henry Daly, the pass rush specialist, the All-American defensive end, came over from Utah, as well as all Big 12 defensive back Smith Snowden. Jaire Hill and Zeke Perry are back. Rod Moore is healthy. They brought in Chris Bracey. We're not sure what the linebackers are because they're going to have to figure that out. But on defense, is this a good enough defense where they can at least keep every game just even? Like, all right, we're going to keep teams under 21 points.
Yes, I think it is that good of a unit, and obviously part of that is sort of contingent on the offense being able to not, force them to be on the field more than they need to be. But yeah, I think the defense is going to be the calling card of this Michigan team. I think the defensive line is really, yeah, there's a threatening front four. John Henry Daly coming over from Utah that you talked about, Trey Pierce and Eno Etta, defensive tackle, and then Cameron Brandt, who is a senior too. I've heard that he's sort of been a spring camp standout, so to speak. So he could be somebody that has a solid season ahead. And then on the back end, guys that you mentioned, Zeke Berry, Jair Hill, Smith Snowden, who's another transfer from Utah following Whittingham over. They've got Rod Moore, who, when he's on the field is a difference maker. He obviously just needs to stay healthy. And then Chris Bracey, who they brought over in the transfer portal as well. There's some experience, which I think is big for Michigan. Because again, I just talked about how the offense is relatively inexperienced. This defense is very experienced, and they know how they've played in big games. They know how to win big games, and they know how to deal with a lot of outside noise and BS and stuff like that. So if Whittingham wants to win games, I think he leans on this defense. I'm sure we'll get into the schedule here shortly, but save for I think the end of the year gets rough for them, but the defense can absolutely, I think, win them or at least keep them in pretty much any game that they have for the first couple months of the season.
Before we get to the schedule, here's the X factor, I guess. Kyle, as you said, Kyle Whittingham's new head coach. Jason Beck is the offensive coordinator, and they've said, "Hey, we're gonna implement more of a spread offense. We want Bryce to use his mobility. We want him to be able to be more creative." And maybe people say that's one of the things that hurt Bryce was he's not a traditional pocket passer that Michigan loves to use. He's a guy who's creative. Could this be easier for Michigan? Like, all right, hey, look, we have a lot of young kids, but hey, we have 4/5 of our offensive lines coming back. Hey, the quarterback is battle tested. Hey, you know what? Let's just as you said, we have the athletes. So let's make this more of a track meet and bring Michigan into the modern day offense, which is the college football spread offense.
Yeah, I believe that I think this change in offensive scheme is going to be good for Bryce. Um, I think spreading the ball out and getting the ball out of Bryce's hands quicker is going to help him. And look, I think Jason Beck is we've seen the job that he did last year with Devin Dampier, who I don't think is nearly as talented as as Bryce Underwood is, just from a physical standpoint and a arm talent standpoint. Um, but I do think that at the end of the day, I kind of said it before too. Like I think Bryce Underwood underwhelmed last year. And for I should say I think he underwhelmed for what some of the expectation was. I think we sort of believed, and the media hype was intended to make you believe that he was going to come in and light it up. And I don't think it was all his fault because again, I do think just the whole program was just a mess. It was a messy time. It was a messy situation, and I don't think he had a great roster around him to be able to shine the way that I think people hoped. But we talked about Malik Washington. JKS over at Cal had a huge freshman season, and Bryce didn't. So yeah, I do believe that the change in offense will be good for him, and the change in the overall culture will be good for him. But I need to see I need to see him buy in, and I need to see him elevate his play because there were just times where he he made some bad decisions. There were times where he put the ball in harm's way and would leave and just miss some throws. Like there were head scratching moments for this uber talented player. So Whittingham and Beck are gonna have to like really figure that out because if he doesn't play well, then they're basically gonna have to start from scratch at the quarterback position, and that's not something that you're going to want to have to do when you are Michigan and you have a conference that is loaded at the top and has a lot of teams sort of quote unquote in the middle that are ready to pounce and beat you if you're not up to their standard.
This might be the hardest schedule in the Big Ten. Yeah, they start off Western Michigan. That's fine. Then Oklahoma comes to town September 12th. And then Utah, then all of a sudden it's a just Iowa at Minnesota, Penn State at home, Indiana at home for October. Rutgers, Michigan State, then it's at Oregon, then UCLA comes to town, and then at Ohio State. That game, is always just, sherries and giggles, not. Somebody said 9-3 might be the ceiling for this team. And look, I'm not going to doubt Kyle Whittingham. He is one of probably the best coaches that does not get enough credit in all of football, but could this be a 7-6 team just because, again, a lot of youth, they're changing a lot of things, and this schedule is going to be hell in a handbasket. Like, there's very rare, like, win games here, like, oh yeah, this is a layup, this is a layup. Like, this, every game you're looking at, like, with the exception of maybe Rutgers, Michigan State, you're like, oh, this is going to be a street fight.
Yeah, I think 9-3 is a very fair ceiling to put on this team. Um, I think that Oklahoma game is I won't say that they can't win it, but I wouldn't bet on them to win it at this point. Um, yeah, Ohio State, I guess, is one of those games that you never actually know who can win until it's played, but I wouldn't expect them to win that. I don't expect them to go into Oregon and win that game. Um, at Indiana, I would expect them to win that game if I had to bet on it right now. So I mean, that's four losses right there. And then, I think like Penn State is a sneaky, that's a losable game, I would say. Um, again, we've talked about Iowa being just like they can, in theory, win almost any game they play, if you get them on a bad day, so to speak. Um, so yeah, I don't love the schedule. I guess the saving grace is a lot of these games, save for Oregon and Ohio State, like they're at home against Oklahoma, they're at home against Indiana, they're at home against Penn State. So that is, I guess the thing that you can hang your hat on if you're a 9-3 hopeful kind of guy. But if the question is, could I see them going 7-6? Yeah, I absolutely can see them losing a lot of these games again, especially if we watch that Oklahoma game and Bryce Underwood comes out and throws three interceptions, and John Mateer kind of just has his way with the defense, with Michigan's defense, and they don't play well in that game. I think that could set a really bad precedent for how this team is going to do this year.
Michigan State is once again they're in hell. It's they were the second worst team in all of the Big Ten last year at 1-8. They might be worse even this year. They after only 2 seasons, Jonathan Smith was let go. They brought in Pat Fitzgerald, which hey, excellent coach, but some spotty past. And this, you'll forgive me if, like most Michigan State fans, I'm like I have no idea who the hell is on this team because a lot of players left, a lot of players transferred out. Good news is Jordan Hall's returned, but if a Michigan State fan, how much are you gonna need like name tags to most of the players going, hi, my name is because they only returned 2 starters entirely on this team. Not on offense, the entire team. Jordan Holland is probably the only player on defense. So like how bad could this team be and who the hell is on this team right now?
Yeah, it's it's not great. Look, I think Pat Fitzgerald was a good hire. I think he knows how to take a frankly, bad program and a bad situation and turn the culture around and create obviously he didn't blow anybody away when he was at Northwestern, but he kept them relevant and competitive in a lot of football games that I mean, you look at Northwestern now, and they're not exactly, lighting the world on fire. So I think Pat Fitzgerald was the right guy to kind of fix this team and to get them to get some kind of standard back. I do unfortunately just kind of think that it's just not a very good roster. And look, I like, I like Cam Edwards, the running back. He was at UConn last year, uber productive when he was there. They also brought in Ben Morosky, who's also from UConn, and he's going to be their left tackle. So I like what they're doing on the offensive line. They also have Trent Fraley, who's from North Dakota State, at center. So I think you know, it shows me that they want to establish an identity of being a running team and being able to run the football effectively. And I think Cam Edwards is a fine back to sort of instill that philosophy and that identity on this season. Um, their quarterback, Alessio Milivojevic, and God only knows if I said that right, but um, he played in limited time last year and looked. I mean, he looked whatever, but I don't really know if he was given a fair shake just based on how bad Michigan State was a year ago. Um, but yeah, on defense, like you said, there's a lot of transfers, a lot of new faces. Um, I would look at the secondary as sort of being somewhere that you can find some talent. I like Trey Bell, the corner from Iowa State, that they brought in. He's long and physical. Charles Brantley, the other corner, was actually at Michigan State 2 years ago. Then went to Miami. Didn't get a ton of playing time there, so now he's come back to Michigan State. So I think those are two good corners to have. You mentioned Jordan Hall as well. He's a very nice linebacker to have in the middle. And I think he can make some plays on the second level for their defense. But yeah, I think I would say Michigan State, and I would probably also say Purdue are sort of the two kind of like rebuilding bottom of the barrel Big Ten teams this year. I don't expect either of them to win a lot. I think honestly, if you get a 4-5 win season, but they look, they at least they keep themselves in some games and they're able to maybe not win a lot, but if they show an identity and they show a direction and they show some good moments that you can kind of hang your hat on, I think that's a successful year one for this program, and then we'll hopefully see Fitzgerald, start to have more of a fingerprint on the recruiting and bringing in some more high profile transfers uh, down the road. But yeah, early on, I don't have a ton of expectations for Sparty.
Let's talk the X Factor. They have good coaching. That's been the thing drilled in by the press releases. Like they stole LeVar Woods, the special teams coordinator from Iowa, who made that team famous. He's now taking care of the special teams. The defensive coordinator Joe Rossi is highly regarded. Him and Max Bolo are now on the defensive side. Nick Sheridan is the offensive coordinator. So, and as you said, Pat Fitzgerald has won at Northwestern, which is like getting blood out of a stone. So again, they have the coaching staff. Do they have any talent though that as you said, when you look at this, it's like, do they have enough talent that can just even win 2 games in the Big Ten? I think for just baby steps, just double your win total from last year would make probably Michigan State fans just like, all right, we're not miserable, we're not happy, but we're not miserable.
Yeah, again, I think if you're a Michigan State fan, your main goals for this year are don't embarrass yourself the entire year. Um, Try to at least be competitive against some teams, and there's a couple games we can mention that I think they can potentially be competitive in, that I think could make fans happy. But if they could show some competitiveness, if they can again, start to show that they're establishing an identity on offense and defense. Um, Maybe Alessio at the quarterback position does take a step and show some things. Again, I think he played well given the circumstances that he was in. But it was just such a sort of limited sample size, and it wasn't really uber competitive. Uh, so we'll see what happens when he now has to run the Big Ten gauntlet. Um, but again, I think they can. If I sort of had to give them like a ceiling, with Fitzgerald and his staff, I think they could be. I think they could crack over 500. In a really good situation. If some close games break their way. Um, but again, that's not what I'm projecting. But Pat Fitzgerald knows what he's doing, and hopefully he can. For Sparty's sake, hopefully he can. Get a culture in there, get an identity that fans can get excited about.
Could they win less though? I mean, you look at last year for the out of conference games were Western Michigan, Boston College, Youngstown State. They won all three of those, and then they won their final game against Maryland. This year it's Toledo, Eastern Michigan. Okay, that's pretty good, and then at Notre Dame, then Nebraska, at Wisconsin, Illinois, Northwestern, at UCLA, at Michigan, Washington, Oregon, at Rutgers. Is there a realistic world where it's like, holy crap, they regressed to 2 wins and 10 losses? Like again, as you said, you're looking. It's like, well, like is Alessio Milojevic a real starting Big Ten quarterback? Do they have a pass rush? Do they have anybody with a skilled position who can outrun defenders? Like, is there a world where you're looking at going, holy crap, this could be a 2-win team?
So first of all, I think I'll say the low end is I think they could lose week 1 to Toledo, and that could kind of just, you know, that could pave the way for just that kind of like 2-10 season that you're talking about, assuming that they can win against Toledo and they can win against Eastern Michigan. I don't think they beat. I think they lose to Notre Dame, pretty handily. But then you have that 5-game stretch before they go to Michigan. They're at home against Nebraska. They're at Wisconsin. They're at home against Illinois. They're at home against Northwestern, and then they go to UCLA. If they win, I'll even say if they win 3 of those games, and then they don't win again, I still think that could be considered. I mean, that would potentially put them at 5 wins, and I think that's a successful year 1 for Pat Fitzgerald. I really do. For what this roster is, for what the Big Ten is right now, I think 5 wins is I would be perfectly satisfied with that if I was a Michigan State fan. Unfortunately, all of those games I listed could be losses, just because I don't think this Michigan State team is that good. And if that's the case, and they do go like 2-10, I mean, hell, even if they go, if their only win is Eastern Michigan, then I think that's really, that's bad. That's a really bad way to start the Fitzgerald era. But I'm going to be a little more optimistic than that. I would peg that they win like 3 or 4 games, but they can show flashes that can make Spartans fans excited.
All right. Speaking of optimism, got to talk about Minnesota, because Minnesota last year, PJ Fleck went to Big Ten Media Day and he said, "Hey, let's go with a college football playoff bid in 2025. That's realistic." All right. Well, didn't happen, but you look at me now. Once again, people, Minnesota, the Golden Gophers are like, "Hey, we're feeling ourselves here a bit. We got maybe the best defensive lineman in all of college football." And returning in Anthony Smith, not edge, defensive line. That's right, he is a big mother lover at 6'6", 295 pounds. Led the Big Ten with 12.5 sacks. Hey, we get a possible first-round draft pick quarterback, but even Anthony Russo is, endorsing. And Drake Lindsay, yes, he likes to drink a bit. We'll get to that in a bit, but hey, he has talent. He has a big arm. Darius Taylor is returning at running back. Hey, We got our entire left side: Greg Johnson, Nathan Roy, Ashton Beers back on the offensive line. Jalen Smith is returning. Hey, our defense, it has some nice pieces, including Maverick Branowski and John Nestor returning, and Kerry Brown. Could this be the year that Minnesota you start looking at going, all right, they're going to break through. They're finally going to get 10 wins.
Yeah, I mean it can be. I sort of wonder. I think you have to kind of start questioning, like, if not now, when with this with Minnesota, and I guess that's not totally fair. Drake Lindsay is, I think, a very talented quarterback, and somebody that we're going to be talking about, maybe not necessarily for the 2027 draft, but I think somebody that 2028 rolls around, and I think he's going to be getting a lot of NFL attention. Um, but at this point, I think you have the quarterback. Darius Taylor is a solid running back. The offensive line is a really well put together unit. Greg Johnson's getting like top 20 kind of love from summer boards I've seen, which I think is that's a little excessive, but he's a great guard, and Ashton Beers, Nathan Roy, this is a big offensive line, but they'll move people. They can create a lot of big gaps in the run game. Um, and then, I think Drake Lindsay has some good weapons around him. I like Javon Tracy. I was a fan of his since he transferred over there last year. Perry Thompson's another good receiver to have. So I think this is a team that there's playmakers on offense, and then on defense, you mentioned Anthony Smith, really solid defensive lineman. Baranowski is a quality linebacker. Uh, I would say John Nestor I think he had 6 interceptions last year, so he's a playmaker on that side of the ball. So there's talent on both sides that if they continue to play the way that they did last year, this team should be a solid unit, a solid team altogether. Uh, it does kind of just feel like, they're so, on paper this is a good roster, and then they just find a way to, like, either lose games that they shouldn't, or they just kind of come up short in those big moments, and then they only win 7 or 8 games, and it's like, all right. I mean, this is again, I would put this offense up, not against like Ohio State and Oregon, but yeah, this in the Big Ten. I would say that this is a top 5 potential offense, if Drake Lindsay kind of puts it all together, and they should be, you know, a very competitive. I think you have to hope that they're maybe not a playoff team, but like ranked by the end of the year. Like they should be kind of what Illinois was last year. Like, that a top 25 team that wins a couple good games and is trying to maybe sneak into the playoff but doesn't quite get there, but has that kind of season. It just feels like they don't quite live up to those expectations. But they certainly have, I think, the players to do it.
Let's talk first about the defense. Anthony, as you said, Anthony Smith, all Big Ten best, 12.5 sacks. They got T.J. Bush in the portal from Cal, who has 13 over 3 years. They brought in 310-pound Marshall defensive tackle, Naquan Crowder. Jackson Howard returns, along with Maverick Baranowski. Could this be the best front four they've had in almost for a long time? Like, do you look at this front seven, front four, and go, all right, maybe depth, they're missing some stuff, but God, they can get to the passer. They don't need the blitz.
Yeah, I think, yeah, depth wise, I would have questions how far it goes beyond Anthony Smith and TJ Bush, who, yeah, is a solid pass rusher over from Cal. Um, but yeah, it's a good front seven to have. I also like Zion Chapman, who's coming over from Florida International. I, I kind of just wonder, like, is there somebody they need someone besides Anthony Smith to create pressure and wreak havoc? And that I think that could be TJ Bush. I think that could be Zion Chapman. Uh, but if it's not, then who? And if it's not, then what are we? Are they really going to be able to be effective enough on defense to, even if the offense scores 20, even maybe 30 points a game, or at least, every so often is able to score that much. Um, is the defense going to be able to slow down some of these other, really talented offenses that are in this conference? I don't know. But yeah, they need Anthony Smith to be that guy again, and I think he can be. Um, what his NFL outlook is, I think is debatable. But there's no doubt that he is a physical menace at the college level that is just hard for teams to deal with. Um, and again, if guys like John Nestor are getting 6 interceptions, and Kerry Brown is another one who was, can find his way all over the field and can uh, make plays on the ball really well. So if they're gonna have big seasons again, then yeah, this defense could do enough to again kind of get Minnesota to that maybe like 9, maybe even 10 win kind of place. That might be pushing it a little, but 9 wins and ranked by the time the season ends, I think it's a very successful season for Minnesota.
What do you want to see from Drake Lindsay going forward? I mean, last year, 63% completion rate, about 22,300 passing yards, 18 touchdowns, only 6 interceptions. Yeah, he got busted in the offseason for underage drinking. Well, that's what happens when you're a teenager and you're an idiot. You do idiot things. But overall, like, can he take the next step? Can he be in a conversation with, Julian Sayin, with Bryce Underwood, with Malik Washington, and even, Hoover and Dante Moore of like, hey, he is a elite Big Ten quarterback.
He could take that step. Yeah, I wouldn't maybe necessarily bet on that, but I think all the tools are there. Um, the size that you want. He's 6'5", 230. He's got, I think he has a quality arm. I don't think it's as, I think some people categorize it as like a howitzer. I don't think it's quite there. But it's certainly a NFL caliber arm. Um, we saw him make some big plays last year, and I've even seen people kind of give him like first round grades, already if he were to declare, which I think is again we're putting the cart before the horse. Um, but there's no denying that he is. I mean, he's got to be the most talented quarterback Minnesota's had. I mean, I'm just trying to even think off the top of my head who I would even say. It's probably in a long time. Minnesota's.
Maybe
I
Gino
don't.
Capoletti. That's how far back we're going. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say I can't even think of one in my lifetime that would have that would have been that would have been just in terms of again like the projection and the potential that Lindsay has. Um. So we'll see what he's able to do. And I've always been a PJ Fleck fan. I mean, I remember him back at Western Michigan, many years ago, when Corey Davis was the talk of the town at wide receiver. And that was a time. But no, I think PJ Fleck is a good coach. I think Drake Lindsay certainly. If the way that you framed it, I think he could be in the Dante Moore, Julian Sayin kind of tier of Big Ten quarterbacks. I wouldn't project that necessarily. But will I be like completely floored if he has that kind of season and really puts himself on the map? No, I think that's in the realm of possibility.
So you hear so many Minnesota fans gonna ask, why not us? Why not? Why can't we be the Indiana of last year? Because you look at the schedule, it's Eastern Illinois, Mississippi State, Akron are very out of schedule. They're all at home, and then at Washington, Michigan. Then it gets a bit easier. It's Purdue, Iowa at home. Real tough game against at Indiana, and then UCLA at home, at Penn State, Northwestern, at Wisconsin. Like again, is there a scenario where all of a sudden it's like, oh, holy crap, they only lost 2 games to Michigan at Indiana, and you're looking going, they're sneaking into the Big Ten championship just because, hey, they maybe want some upsets, everything's clicking in, you're going, oh, all right, Minnesota finally has arrived.
Yeah, yeah. I think this, save for another team we'll talk about shortly here, but I think Minnesota has one of the easiest schedules in the conference, and yeah, like a road game against Indiana is obviously a tough, a tough matchup for anyone. But Mississippi State is their big non-conference game, but that's at home against Michigan, at home against Iowa, at home against UCLA. Like I do think at Washington and at Penn State are probably the two other kind of games that I would worry about, and I would probably say that they're going to lose. But if they can win one or maybe even both of those games, uh, then this certainly could be if their only loss is at Indiana, then this is definitely a playoff team. I would probably project that they lose 3 games. So I think like 9-3 is a very reasonable expectation. And if I had to, if it all goes bad and Drake Lindsay doesn't have the season that we hope, could this team be below 500? They could, but I think I would say that like 8 or 9 wins is more what I would lean toward than say like 5 or 6 wins.
All right, and I know Price Carter has hope. It's all right. Look, Dalen Rayola left, but we took all that money, we sunk it into other positions. Nebraska fans are trying to talk themselves into hope and going, hey, yeah, Dylan Rayola basically held the ball too long, sometimes through bad interceptions. So, hey, it's an addition by subtraction. I'm glad, Matt Rule got a contract extension because he's banking on a lot of transfers to hopefully figure this out. As you said, Rayola's gone. They brought in Anthony Calandre, the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Year from UNLV, the replacement quarterback. Uh, Quasi Gilner is coming in at wide receiver from UCLA. They revamped the offensive line with Paul Mubenga, Brendan Black from LSU and Iowa State, as well as South Carolina's Tree Babadlade. And again, you sort of are hoping that, you look at this offense and just Makai Nelson is returning after Emma Johnson finally, ran out of eligibility, but this is, I'm not gonna lie here. This is kind of, you look at this offense like, okay, is this a Big Ten offense or could this get ugly here quickly?
Yeah, this yes, it could get ugly quickly. And look, I like Calandria. I remember when he was at Virginia, and you talked about he was at UNLV last year. This is one of those, just I don't think he's an NFL quarterback, but on the college level, he can make plays, and he can, be an effective scrambler, and so I'd like to believe that there's some potential here. I think Corey Barney is a receiver to watch on this team. He's a big play guy. I think Nyza Hunter, who was at Cal a couple seasons ago, He's someone that I think is a good addition for this team. Um, it it, it just yeah, like I think you kind of nailed it. Like I don't think it's a I think it's a good offense if I was looking at a Mountain West Conference preview or maybe even like a Big 12 preview, but even that I'm not sure. But I just don't look at this roster and think like, oh, you're gonna stand up to. I mean, again, I can't. I'm not even trying to compare to like Ohio State and Oregon because I don't even think that's fair. But like, even if I looked at like a Washington, if I looked at like a Illinois, if I looked at other teams that we've talked about that maybe aren't so like Minnesota, like other teams that I don't think are elite teams by any means, but I just don't see how this roster wins a majority of football games that they play on a Big Ten schedule. I just don't see it. And I'll say on defense, like I think Andrew Marshall is a solid corner. I just watched him recently and got him on my board. Uh, Williams Nwaneri is a freakish. He's like 6'7", 270 is his listed height and weight. So he's a very interesting physical specimen on the defensive line. That could be a difference maker. Um, there's some. I don't want to say there's no talent on the defense, but again, I just don't think you look at this roster and think. I don't look at this roster and see a world that they finish above. I guess I could see a world they finish above 500, but we'd be really scratching the top of the ceiling. I think if that happens, I don't see a team that's really going to be relevant in meaningful Big Ten action.
To end the year last year, they gave up in 3 games 121 points. And we're not talking against like Indiana, Iowa State, and Oregon. We're talking at Penn State, they gave up 37. Iowa at home, they gave up 40. And then Utah, where Utah, a lot of their best players were sitting out due to the NFL draft coming up on the Las Vegas Bowl, they gave up 44. So, new defensive coordinator Rob Ulrich arrives from San Diego State. He's putting in a 4-2-5 scheme. As we mentioned before, it's Andrew Marshall, Donnie, and Donovan Jones are returning. They've brought in transfers. Owen Chambers from San Diego State, Oregon State's Dexter Foster, Jashir Whittingham, and Anthony Jones. They hopefully improve the pass rush. Like we mentioned before earlier when we talked about Indiana, their wild defense of 3-3-5. Could this work, or is this basically like trying to, as they say, put lipstick on a pig?
Yeah, I'll say too. They added Dwayne McDougal, safety from San Diego State. Um, so he was a playmaker on the back end. I remember when I watched like Chris Johnson, who I was a huge fan of in this past draft. He was somebody that was also out there making plays. Yeah, look, I really just don't know. I kind of something else I've talked about with other teams that I've sort of been questioning, how well they're going to do this year. It's like, who's going to be the guy that creates the pressure up front and can get backfield and can get sacks and can get pressures and can get tackles for losses, uh, and that kind of thing. Uh, just again looking at these names that you've listed, I just don't. I don't see anyone that's either everyone's unproven in terms of because they're transfers or they just haven't had a lot of playing time in the Big Ten, or they're just not guys that are consistent pass rush that haven't been consistent pass rush threats in their careers. Um, and look, maybe they can find a way to somebody can emerge, somebody can break out and be that guy for this team. I just don't yeah, I just don't know who that is right now. And until I see someone make that leap, I just can't imagine you as a team winning a lot of games in the Big Ten if you can't create a consistent pass rush up front.
So what? I guess what are realistic expectations for Anthony Calandria? He has, as you said, Nazai Hunter and Jacoby Barney are back. The offensive line, Elijah Pritchard and Justin Evans are back. And again, he is a more mobile, say, maybe more savvy quarterback than Dylan Raiola. But Raiola, if you could argue that, Baby Mahomes looked the part and had the talent, Calandri doesn't. So again, what's realistic for him in terms of like, okay, a Big West player coming to the Big Ten, and he doesn't have maybe like a lot of other quarterbacks in the Big Ten that extra special sauce athleticism.
Yeah, look again. I kind of said it before too. Like I think he's a good college quarterback. And again, I remember when he was at Virginia and he was able to have some moments there. And last year at UNLV, he was really productive at UNLV last year. Uh, both again as a thrower and a runner. I just for as great a job as I think Dan Mullen's doing at UNLV, and I commend him. Playing well at UNLV is very different than playing well at Nebraska in the Big Ten when you don't have a lot of you don't have a lot of expectations, you don't have a lot of talent around you, and you're going to be playing really talented, well coached football teams more often than not. Um, so can I can Calandria have a good season, and a productive season, and he could be able to put points on the board and get something, keep Nebraska, in those kinds of games if they sort of become these kind of shootouts or it's a more of a high scoring affair. Sure, I could see that. Um, but what I fear is going to happen more often than not is they're just going to get steamrolled, by some offenses that they face, and they're not going to be able to keep up because they just don't have a a ton of talent both in the passing game and in the run game. So they could surprise me. Again, I'm not closing the door on a above 500 season, which I think would be a big accomplishment for Matt Rule. As he still tries to just put this program back together again. But I don't have a ton of optimism that that's what I'm going to say this year.
The schedule is it's a difficult one. It's Ohio, Bowling Green, North Dakota with three non-conference games, and then after Michigan State, which is their Big Ten home opener, it's Maryland, Indiana, at Oregon, Washington, at Illinois, at Rutgers, Ohio State, at Iowa. Last year they started off strong and they rode basically a 5-1 start to 7-6 overall. And then, thankfully for Matt Rule, he got a contract extension. Could he go back to having a losing season this year? Like when you look at the schedule, you hate to say it, but is 4-8 on the table?
I think it is. I will say to Matt Rule's credit, one of the things that he's kind of sort of made a career on is consistent improvement. You think back to his time at Temple. You think back to his time at Baylor. We won't talk about the Carolina Panthers, but in both of those examples, he took bottom of the barrel college football teams. I think like Baylor was a 1-win team and Temple was a 2-win team or something like that when he took them over, and he got both of them to above 500 records in a matter of a couple seasons through really just building a building a program the way that you're supposed to build a program. So I can't sit here and say like that can't happen. Like we've seen Matt Rule do it. The problem is that was in the pre-transfer portal, pre-NIL era of college football where recruiting and consistent team building over time mattered more than it does now. And you look at we just talked about Indiana, how they just reloaded at within the transfer portal, and we'll get to Oregon and Ohio State and how loaded they are, and Michigan bringing in guys from Utah, and these other programs that are attacking the transfer portal, and I just don't think Nebraska's doing that at the same level that some of these other Big Ten schools are. And so yeah, when you look at the schedule, very winnable games to start. But then like right as soon as I think at Michigan State, I talked about it before, but I think that's losable. Depending on what Michigan State is this year. Maryland is losable if Malik Washington is balling. I don't think they beat Indiana. I don't think they beat Oregon. I don't think they beat Washington. I don't think they beat Illinois, and I don't think they beat Rutgers, and I don't think they beat Ohio State, and I don't think they beat Iowa. So that right there is what did I just rattle off? 8 losses, 7 losses, actually more than that. 8 or 9 losses potentially that we're talking about. So
Yep.
if they could they, I mean, yeah, realistically, I could see a world where they go winless in the Big Ten, and if that's the case, I don't think Matt Rule survives that. Um, if they have a sort of maybe not in the way that they were 7-6 last year, because yeah, it was rough to just watch them collapse. Once they got to the Big Ten, but if they can stay above 500 and maybe show some more signs of life in the back half of the year, and maybe beat a couple of these teams that I think are potential 8-9 win teams, uh, then I think you can continue to invest in Matt Rule and invest in his vision. But I could also see a world where the wheels fall off the wagon and it gets bad quickly. There's a higher level of variance with Nebraska than I think some of these other teams that we're talking about.
Speaking of investing, well, we get to Northwestern, and after last year where they finished 7-6, 4-5 in the Big Ten, hey, they made a bowl game and won against Central Michigan. The investments are coming in now. 862 million brand new Ryan Field is upon us. Hey, you understand that we are 129th in scoring, so we're investing in the offense, and we're going to bring in not only a new quarterback, we're bringing in Chip Kelly to run the offense. That's right. And so let's start with this Northwestern. When you look at this, and they're doubling down on a lot of things. Hey, Aiden Childs, yeah, we know it was hell in Michigan State, but hey, we think you can do well here at Northwestern. Hey, Chip Kelly, well, you've flamed out in a lot of other places, but hey, you're an excellent offensive coordinator in college level. Come on back, and again, if somebody said to you, make sense of Northwestern, how do you make sense of a team that we keep thinking, well, they're eventually going to crater, and yet they keep going, oh, well, even with their high academic rates, and they don't really spend a lot, and it's, they don't usually recruit the greatest guys. Again, they always seem to be just hovering around 500 and in a bowl game.
Yeah, I Northwestern is yeah, on paper, I actually think this is a pretty good team. I think it starts with Aiden Giles, who you just mentioned. He comes over from Michigan State. And he certainly, he didn't have a great, I wouldn't say, season by any means. But the talent is there. You see flashes of a really good quarterback and a potential NFL quarterback. Just in terms of what he brings to the table with his arm, and some of the throws that he's able to make, and his just overall athleticism. Uh, he also, for every for every great throw he has and for every, great moment that he has, it feels like he has like a couple of moments that just leave you he's throwing balls in the dirt and he's throwing into double coverage and he's just doing things that make you question why he's even playing quarterback. Um, but there are flashes and look, would Chip Kelly have been my, if I had to tell you it back in January who's going to be the Northwestern offensive coordinator this year, I don't know if I would have gotten to Chip Kelly. If you gave me at least maybe 25 guesses. But I think he can work. He's sort of been a mixed bag, I'd say, and in college, both as a head coach and an offensive coordinator. Um, but I think Aiden Childs again is a talented quarterback that he can work with and he can develop. And I do think there's some talent on this team. I like Griffin Wild at the receiver spot. He'll sort of probably be the number one option for Childs this year. Um, they've got a good offensive line. Uh, I like Grant Segrin at the tackle spot. Azomo Orotokai, who is their guard slash center. I'm not sure which one he's going to play, but he's played. I think he's played both, and I think he can play either. He's a talented interior offensive lineman. Um, and then I like Caleb Komalafe, their running back too. Like there's some nice pieces on this offense. And then on defense, there's some good players in the secondary. Josh Fussell and Braden Turner were guys that were making plays last year and creating turnovers. Um, they've got Jamal Johnson is a transfer over from Central Florida who could be we've seen the kind of edge rushers that Central Florida's been putting out recently. So if he's anything even remotely close to a Malachi Lawrence and a Najee Kelly, he could be somebody that excites people. Uh, so there's some good talent. Obviously, they lose Anto Saka, who was I think would have been easily the most talented player on this defense if he stuck around, but he is gone now. So you're going to hope to try to replace that production. Um, but I think there's good players that, again, Northwestern's one of these schools that doesn't, they don't need to win 10, 11 games. They can win seven or eight and feel really good about themselves. And I think that is that's something that could very well happen. And if they get Aiden Childs to somewhere that NFL teams are excited about drafting him, that's a successful season, I would say, for Northwestern.
Could this be the best, maybe, skilled room they've had in a long time? They return all Big Ten, third team All Big Ten wide receiver Griffin Wild. They got Haydon Elegon, the second coming back. Tight end transfers Alex Honning, who's 6'6", 275. Luke Denecki. Drew Wagner is there. We talked about, Caleb, running back Caleb Kamalafe Jr. Like, I know it's Northwestern, so if they're not going to get the guys who can go to Bama or Ohio State or Georgia or Oregon, but if you're Aiden Childs, could this be for what Northwestern maybe their best complete package of skill players they've ever had?
Yeah, it's a lot of quality players that I think we're going to be talking about. I think Griffin Wild gets drafted. I think Caleb Komalafe gets drafted. I think Hayden Elgon could get drafted. Probably not in 2027, but he could get drafted. Again, I think it really just does hinge on what you get out of Aiden Childs and what you get out of just this entire, the entire Chip Kelly offensive experience as a whole. Um, and I think he's somebody that can feature Wild in a way that I think he ought to be. Um, and yeah, and we'll see. we'll see if Childs has the talent to, to utilize these players. I agree. I think they are good. And yeah, for Northwestern standards, probably are among one of, if not the best skill position groups that they've had. Again, at least in my recent lifetime, for sure. But we'll see. Again, Chip Kelly is just such a, you never know what you're gonna get with him. Um, so I'm not, gonna like totally jump in the barrel for Northwestern, but I can absolutely see a world where they're productive and they're scoring points. And again, we're talking about this Northwestern team as a 7-8 win kind of program, and that I think for them is a successful season.
So Brandon Flakes has returned, but as you said, Anton Saka is gone. He was their lone real pass rush specialist. Look, I like the secondary with Braden Turner, Robert Fitzgerald, Josh Fussell, but who gets pass rush here? I mean, again, if when you're playing teams like Penn State, Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon, you need to get rush the passer. So who's going to provide that for this defense?
Yeah, I think that's the question. And I mentioned Jamal Johnson. I think Michael Kilbane is sort of the other guy that you're hoping kind of breaks out and kind of comes on the scene again. I don't see anyone that is gonna produce and be a difference maker in the way that Antosaka was. And I think losing him is gonna hurt this defense. Um, but I think you kind of have to hope that Johnson and Kilbane can sort of, you know, combine to be that kind of pass rush threat. Um, and then, we'll see. I also don't really know what they're going to get in the middle. Um, they have guys like Brandon Flakes. Um, but that I think could be a weak point in their defense as well. Again, I think the hope is Kilbane and Johnson create pressure off the edge, and then you can get some production out of your secondary like you did last year with Josh Fussell and Braden Turner and Ore Adey, being able to make plays on the back end and keep your defense from giving up 30 plus points every game.
What's realistic? I mean, I look at in some ways they might have probably the most overall hard schedule. They're off their out conference games, South Dakota State, at home, Colorado at home. Those are their first two games, and then September 26th at Indiana, then Penn State. They play Ball State. That should be a win, but then at Michigan State, Rutgers at home, at Oregon, Iowa, at Ohio State, at Minnesota, Illinois. Like again, the schedule makers didn't do them any favors. So I know some people say, well, a third bowl appearance in 4 seasons is a reasonable goal. Is it, or are you looking at that schedule going, that's just if they overachieve, they at least have 6 losses, and that means they're going to win all the 50-50 games or even 40-60 games.
Yeah, I think the ceiling slash like the high end hope for them is 7-6, maybe 8-5, and even that feels I wouldn't know. I would struggle to find 8 wins for you. But if they are bowl eligible again, if Aiden Childs plays really well and finally starts to put it together, I think that's a successful season. But yeah, looking at it, I mean, it's rough when you're at Indiana, at Oregon, and at Ohio State. I mean, just forget about it. Um, even I'm always a FCS homer. Like, I don't think South Dakota State is a cakewalk. I mean, that's a game that they're gonna want to prove that they can hang with Big Ten competition, and I think South Dakota State is always a one of the standard bearers of FCS football. Um, so I wouldn't sleep on that being an upset. Yeah, and same with like Colorado could easily come in and win that game if Julian Lewis is if he is the truth and if he starts to play like he's supposed to. Um, that could be a dangerous game too. So I don't even feel great about the non-conference schedule overall. And then yeah, I think there's tough games with I think Penn State is a sneaky team and at Michigan State isn't great. Iowa again, just one of those teams that you can never say you're definitely going to beat. At Minnesota, I don't love that as a I think that's a loss. I think Illinois probably beats them too. So yeah, I think 4-8 has to be on the table, and I think there is if that's the case, I think there is a question of like what you applaud the job David Braun has done uh in his time at Northwestern, but new team trying to pave the way for a new stadium, I should say, and they're trying to pave the way for a new really legitimate investment in this football program. I think you might try to swing for a candidate that can like really get boosters and donate funders excited for this program.
All right, not enough with the entrees. Let's go to the main course. That is the Ohio State. Only they can lose four top 10 draft picks. And yet people are still going, yeah, they're one of the odds on favorites to win the national championship. That's right. They lost Carnell Tate. They lost Arvell Reese, Sonny Styles, Caleb Downs. And yet you still look and it's like, holy crap. That offense is loaded. It's Jeremiah Smith. It's Brandon Innes at wide receiver. Oh, by the way, Chris Henry Jr., many people say is the next super uber freshman freak to come out. Julian Sayin is back. Bo Jackson is back. And the offensive line led here by Austin Cerveveld with Luke Montgomery, Carson Hinsman, Philip Daniels. I know everybody's saying, oh, LSU, Texas. Could Ohio State, though, have the most complete and best offense when you go, damn, all right, well, there's not a weakness.
Yeah, I'm just gonna come out and say it now. They're my pick to win the Big Ten. I think, which probably isn't a controversial take, but no, look, yeah, I think this isn't a complete team from top. I mean, similar to last year. This is a complete team, top to bottom. You've got, the uber freak talents in Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry at receiver. Devin McCowan is a favorite of mine. I love his game, and I think he is a perfect complement to those two guys in the receiving core. They can run the ball. Bo Jackson is obviously very talented, and he's got an offensive line that can create space for him, and he really doesn't even need that much space because he just runs over guys, it feels like most of the time. Um, but I think they can run the ball. I think they've got an elite wide receiver room per usual. And if Julian Sayin is, the accurate point guard kind of quarterback that he was last year, and I even think there's room for improvement for him from last year. But if he can make some strides and continue to just facilitate and get the ball to the most talented people on the field at a consistent rate, it will be pretty much impossible for Big Ten teams, and honestly 98.5% of the teams that are in college football to be able to stop or at least slow down all of the talent that is on this offense. And I always have to like remind myself that Arthur Smith is their offensive coordinator now. So expect to see a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, which will be good because they've got, Nate Roberts is they're sort of like their next budding star at the tight end spot. He's a sophomore. They brought in Mason Williams, who was at Ohio University last year. He's got some talent. And then they've got Hunter Welsing, uh, who is another transfer as well. So, uh, they're going to want to. I think an Arthur Smith team, if I've learned anything, is that they're going to want a lot of tight ends on the field. And they're going to want a lot of to run the ball. That's going to be their first foot forward, and then they're going to open it up and let Jeremiah Smith, Chris Henry, and Devin McEwen just annihilate any secondary that they play against.
Let's talk for defense. Again, they lost a lot of that talent, which you mentioned, including 4 top 10 first-round picks. They have a transfer portal bit. Earl Little Jr. is replacing Caleb Downs, the all second team safety from Florida State. Is the nickelback slash safety. They brought in Alabama defensive lineman James Smith to help, soften the blow that Reese and Styles left with the pass rush. They still Kenyatta Jackson is still there. They brought in transfers Christian Allegrio, at linebacker, Terry Moore at free safety. Again, it's Matt Patricia as a defensive coordinator knew what he was doing. He's done a good job. Do they have, I guess, on defense, just maybe not the defense they had last year, which was elite, but just even a very good defense for what could be a tough schedule for them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't, can we really sit here and say like this Ohio State team isn't just gonna reload again and just be, yeah, yeah, they lost a ton of talent. There's no question about that. And I will say, maybe it's not quite as loaded and talented as it was a year ago, but there's still some big time playmakers on this team. I think Kenyatta Jackson is somebody that they're going to be looking to take that next step as a pass rusher and as a defensive lineman off the edge, to really be that guy that can win one on one and can be a threat to get in the backfield on a lot of plays. Um, Devin Sanchez, their corner, is somebody that I think we're going to be talking about as a top 10 potential pick in 2028. He's not draft eligible this year. He's a true sophomore, but this dude is incredibly talented, and could honestly wind up being the best corner in college football this year. Um, he's really that good. Um, you talked about some of the transfers too. I'm a big fan of John Walker, the defensive tackle, who I would expect to take the sort of Caden McDonald role from last season, and we saw how great he was and how much he meant to not even just the defensive line, but the entire crux of the defense, especially the front seven, allowing Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles to be able to make plays because he could just eat double teams in the middle. I expect John Walker to fill that void and to be that kind of threat, in the middle of the defensive line. Christian Allegro is someone they're going to hope kind of can do some Arvell Reese things. I don't know if he's quite as just freakishly athletically gifted in the way that Reese was, but he's gonna fill that kind of role as well. And look, you said it too. Like Matt Patricia is a top defensive mind in college football right now. He is gonna know how to utilize his personnel and these players to put them in positions to succeed, and then they're just gonna show how incredibly talented they are, and they're going to make a lot of plays. And like I said, I think Ohio State wins the Big Ten, and is a national title contender for sure. So I really don't. again, are they quite as talented as last year? No, probably not. But I really don't expect them to lose that much, that much of a step on where they were last year.
How much pressure will be on the defensive secondary? The talent is there. Returning starters Jermaine Matthews Jr. and Jalen McClain. They are proven winners, and they are studs. We talked about Devin Sanchez, maybe the one of the most talented sophomores in college football. He's now a starting cornerback. And look, yes, you lost unfortunately a lot of talent, including Caleb Downs and Sonny Styles. But hey, Terry Moore transferred over from Duke. Earl Litter Jr. we mentioned before transferred over from Florida State for nickelback and free safety. So is this the strength? Is this basically what they're going to have to rely on, especially against maybe 4 or 5 games where they'll be taking on elite level quarterbacks?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that again, I think the world of Devin Sanchez. I think Devin Sanchez could end the year as the best corner in college football. So right out of the gate, I think he is a big difference maker. And then in terms of the other guys, like Jermaine Matthews, I think was good last year and can be a quality corner again this year. I think Jalen McClain, I should probably say, like, I think Jalen McClain is a really big time candidate to be a breakout player for the entire Buckeyes team, not even just the defense. I don't think I'm not going to say he's on the level of Caleb Downs necessarily, but he's athletic as hell. He can he can cover ground really quickly on the back end. And if he can just improve his ball skills a bit, he's definitely a difference maker in that safety role. And yeah, and Terry Moore and Earl Little are two guys that we've seen them make plays too. They both kind of just need to stay healthy and overall just I think they need to just be a little more physical. But they are the secondary is uber talented. I mean, even guys like Cam Calhoun, who was uh, a transfer at the corner spot as well. Like he's a starting corner on a vast majority of college football teams, and he's the number three corner for this team because Matthews and Sanchez are also just that good. Um, so yeah, I really like the secondary. I really like the whole defense as a whole. It just doesn't really feel like there's a true weakness if everybody kind of you know elevates themselves to where I think they could potentially wind up.
All right, so let's get to the schedule. It's again, I'm not predicting them to lose, have a losing record. I'm not even predicting them to lose more than 4 games. It's going to be tougher than last year. I mean, last year they played Texas at Ohio State right off the bat. Yes, they avoided Oregon and Indiana till the end of the year. Yes, they had tough games, but it's like, well, wait a minute here. They avoided Iowa. They played, Minnesota at home, at Washington early on. This year, schedule's a lot tougher here. It's Ball State, then, oh yeah, we're going to at Texas. Yeah, they won't hold a grudge. Then Kent State, Illinois, then at Iowa, Maryland, at Indiana, at USC, which we'll get to them. They're going to be a fun little team. Then Oregon, Northwestern, at Nebraska, Michigan. Again, I'm not. I know you're high. You're betting the farm, but is there a world where even with all that talent, it's like holy crap, they lose 3 games because again, at Texas, at Indiana, at USC, Oregon, Michigan, at Iowa, which is never a fun place to play. And you're like, yeah, an injury here, a bad play here, and all of a sudden, yeah, holy crap, they're 9-3.
Yeah, look, I don't, I'm not gonna sit here and say I love the schedule just in terms of like trying to project, a big season for Ohio State. I'll be candid. I think they lose that game to Texas. I think Texas is gonna want some vengeance after last year and home, and they're gonna be pissed and they're gonna want to win. So I think they can. I think they win that game. Um, I really though, like I yeah, I think the only other two games that I would say that are really in danger of being losses are Indiana and Oregon, and obviously this is college football, and I'm sure that there's a world where there's an upset that I don't predict. Like, yeah, USC could be an upset. Iowa's one of those that could always just be an upset. Michigan is, the game. It's always a a threat to be a late season loss for Ohio State. We've seen it before. So, yeah, of course there's a world where it doesn't work out and they lose a couple games that they probably shouldn't. But if I was, if I just was sitting here and betting, just logically who I think wins these games, I really don't. I really think like at Indiana is like the one that I would maybe be worried about, but I think they could even win that game. Like they only lost to Indiana by 3 points last year in the playoff or in conference championship game. So like we know they can hang with Indiana, for however good that they're going to be, and at home against Oregon, I think is also a winnable game. Kind of depending on what we'll talk about them shortly, but again, I just do think that at the end of the day, similar to last year, and obviously they also didn't, they didn't win the Big Ten, they didn't go all the way last year, but I still just think they're the most talented football team in the Big Ten, and I just have to, ride with that fact until I see evidence that they're gonna run into problems.
So I know why you're saying that. Because of this man. And I get, Anthony, you're holding a grudge. I understand. You were going, 6 months ago, you were going, hey, you know what? Dante Moore in a Jets uniform doesn't sound too bad. Hey, we don't have to worry about, Arch holding us hostage. Dante Moore is going to come out. Then he went, no, I'm returning to college. And you went, you motherfucker. And then all of a sudden, more players like Mateo Ugalea would decide, oh, I'll return to college. And then Amari Washington went, yeah, you know what? I'll return to college. And even other players like Jamari Johnson went, yeah, you know what? I'm staying another year for college. And Pani Lalulu decided, hey, I'm staying as well. Davey Uli went, yep, I'm staying. And all of a sudden, you look at Oregon, and just when you thought, oh, this is going to end, a lot of these guys are going to leave, they all decide, nope, we want one more crack. So let's ask this here: if you think Ohio State is your favorite, if you put aside emotion, because I know you're pissed, like, God damn, Dante, I blame you. We could have had Amari Washington and you on my Jets, but no, you had to get, you know, let's say enlightened ideals and decide, no, I want to return for a national championship. Is Oregon one of those favorites where they are one of the favorites to go, hey, we will win a national championship for the 2026 season?
Hey, first off, the beauty of the Jets is they will be right back in contention to getting Dante Moore next year. So I have not lost hope that Dante Moore is still going to be a Jet. But no, in terms of Oregon this year and what they're going to be, look, Dante Moore was going to be the second overall pick, and he was going to be that with reason. He is, I have to say he's the most talented quarterback in the conference. He's my QB1 on my 2027 board, above even Arch Manning. So I think the world of him. I think he's a hell of a player. Um, you said it too, like they're bringing back so many starters from last year that you have to, you have to be excited about building on what you had last year and now being able to potentially get an even more talented, roster of guys. I love like Decorian Moore is a true just menace on the outside in terms of his speed and his acceleration. Um, Evan Stewart, if he can be healthy, is somebody that they would definitely want to feature. Um, and yeah, bringing back guys on the offensive line like Lalulu and Dave Iuli. Um, is they're going to be able to they're going to want to run the football like they did last year, and they've got really good running backs. They've got De'Aaron Hill Jr. They've got Jordan Davison. Um, so they've got the weapons. They got Jamar Johnson at tight end too. Like they've got the weapons. They've got the offensive line. They've got the run game. I do have to wonder what losing Will Stein is going to mean for them, and I'm not saying that it's going to derail their entire by any means, but I have to wonder, is this sort of the equivalent of the Lions losing Ben Johnson, and is there going to be a little bit of a fall off in terms of offensive production? You know, I wouldn't expect much of a drop off, but I can't say that there's a non-zero chance that that happens. Um, and on defense, there's a ton of talent, especially up front. Uiagalelei, you mentioned. Amari Washington is a just damn animal at defensive tackle. Yeah, they got Bear Alexander at defensive tackle as well. They've got Tatum Tuioti at the other defensive end spot. Um, I like their linebackers too. Devin Jackson, Jerry Mixon are solid players as well. On the back end, they brought in Coy Parrish from Minnesota to play safety. They've got the two young corners, Brandon Finney and Ife Obadegwu, they're both sophomores, but man, they both really they stepped up in big moments last year, and I noticed, and I think they're definitely going to be guys we're talking about in terms of NFL guys in the near future. Um, so yeah, look, top to bottom, this roster, you have to say it's right up there with Ohio State. Again, I do personally give the edge to Ohio State at this point. Um, but yeah, would I be surprised if Oregon won the Big Ten? No, this is a complete team that is hungry, and they want to prove that they aren't a fluke, that they aren't regular season darlings, that they can go out there and win meaningful playoff games. I think Dan Lanning is a hell of a coach, and a hell of a motivator, and I expect big things from this Oregon team. I do just my questions with Will Stein, and my questions of when the rubber hits the road and I see Jeremiah Smith lined up against Brandon Finney, or I see Chris Henry lined up against Ife Obadegwu, or whatever it is. I do just think like they're gonna have a hard time, and Ohio State's gonna be able to control that hypothetical matchup, from an offensive standpoint.
Let's talk about the one big elephant in the room for Oregon. That is, they're replacing both tackles. Isaiah World is gone, and yes, I know he was not everybody's cup of tea, but he was a very good left tackle for the college ranks. It's Fox Crater, the sophomore, gets the first crack. Transfer right tackle Michael Bennett, the third, takes over. Are they good enough? Again, you're gonna when we talk, we're going to their schedule, and it's if Ohio State plays some tough games, Oregon's going to have some ones that are like, ooh, this could be uncomfortable here. Can both those tackles hold up to give that offense time to just get open and throw the ball?
I mean, they can, yeah. I do think that's kind of the if you have a hole, so to speak, on the offensive side, I think that's kind of what you're worried about, because I talked about Lalulu and Iuli on the interior, and I think they're solid, and they're experienced, and they're very quality interior blockers. Um, it is not as sure a thing at the tackle spots. Fox Crater's only a sophomore, and I think he flashed and looked good and looked like a potential quality left tackle, but he's rather unproven. And then Michael Bennett, who comes over from Yale, That Ivy League to Big Ten is not always, something that you're gonna be super confident is a recipe for success. But if the Oregon staff has faith in him, then I who am I to question them? Um, but we'll see. I absolutely can see a world where Dante Moore, I think, is also just good enough that even if there maybe is a deficiency in the offensive line, I mean, we saw it last year. I don't think Isaiah World was, you know, the greatest left tackle anyone's ever seen, and I think the Oregon Duck offense was still more than fine, and Dante Moore was still able to play his way to second overall pick potential. So, like, I think they're talented enough to overcome if that is a deficiency. Um, but at the same time, that could be a deficiency that, we've seen time and time again in these playoffs how, the line of scrimmage is so important and so crucial to whether you win or lose against, the Indianas and the Miamis and the Ohio States and the Texases of the world. And if that's their weak spot, then I do think that is a cause for concern.
If their O line is the question mark, is their defensive line the best in football in terms of not just front four but also depth? You look at it, as we said before, you got Ugalele, it's Bear Alexander, Tuioti, it's Jamari Washington, and then by the way, they're very high on Nazir Wyatt and Aiden Brayland. And by the way, they got Dante Robinson and a transfer junior to help out in defense tackle. And I know there's people over there who are raving about redshirt freshman defensive tackle Matthew Johnson. Like, usually it's like, all right, well, yes, this is a good defensive line, but if one guy gets injured, they're screwed. Like, could this be one where even if guys are nicked up, like Bear or Amari or Mateo, they can go, yeah, sit the game. We still have enough where we can even just start rotating guys in. So you're facing 8 guys every game who can get after the quarterback.
Oh yeah, I could absolutely see this being the best defensive line in college football. And look, it does start with the front four, so to speak, that I talked about. Uiagalelei, Washington, Alexander, and Tuioti. Um, but there is depth. There is, I think Nasir Wyatt is somebody. I think he's still filling out physically, but I think he's a potentially really good pass rusher down the road. You mentioned Matthew Johnson, the freshman D tackle that they're excited about as well. He could start to definitely, emerge and kind of take a step forward in his development. Um, yeah, this is a loaded a loaded unit, and I think their success is going to derive a lot from how much Amari Washington is that freakish defensive tackle that can dominate against the run and hold the point of attack so well, but also is so just explosive at 330 pounds and able to get into the backfield. If he's able to do that, and then you have Uiagalele and Tuioti able to win on the outside as well, it will be a nightmare for pretty much every offensive line that they're going to go up against this year.
Comes down to 3 games. The schedule, you look, it's Boise State home game, and then all of a sudden Oklahoma State. Yeah, last year we slapped them around, called them Sally, took their lunch money. Eric Morris and Drew Mestamaker are now on that team, and September 12th at Oklahoma State that'll be fun. I still think Oregon will win, but that'll be fun. That'll be a little bit scary. We mentioned before they play at Ohio State. They play, at USC. Michigan November 14th, Washington November 28th. Again, they've said this, it is national championship or bust. Is this a team, Vova? Even if they could, even if they lose 2 or 3 games, it's like, oh crap, the season's over. This is screwed. What the hell happened? Because again, they're going to face possibly 3 quarterbacks who might go in the top 15 if they all come out in the draft. Mestamaker, Sayin, and Jaden Maivaya, who we'll get to later on.
Yeah, I think this is I know I just said that Ohio State is gonna win the Big Ten in my mind, and I am gonna stick to that. However, if we are just gonna base this on schedule, I think you kind of have to say that Oregon has the advantage in that regard. Um, I don't I don't see a loss other than Ohio State. Um, their toughest their toughest games other than Ohio State are, you know, Michigan and Washington both at home and at USC. That's probably the other. Like I could see that as a loss, but I don't think I would predict it as a loss. Um, just because I never really know what I'm gonna get out of USC and every year it feels like. But yeah, I
Like
appreciate
at
the
Oklahoma
excitement for.
State with that whole atmosphere and with Drew Mestamaker, with all the North Texas guys who transferred, Eric Morris, it all of a sudden feels like they're going to be just we are back. Oklahoma State is back, and if you're Oregon, it's like, oh crap, we might lose our first game, the second game of the season. This is not what we planned on.
Yeah, I don't think that that's actually a threat to them. Yes, I think Oklahoma State will be better, and I think I think they're not going to get run out of whatever the score was last year. What was it, like 70 nothing or something like that when they played? So I don't think it's going to be that
69-3 last year. It will be a
69
bit
to 3.
closer.
Yeah, no, right. Yeah, sorry. I overshot the runway on the score. But no, look, it'll definitely be closer, and I think they'll be more competitive and more fun to watch. Oklahoma State will be, but I still think it's not even remotely close in terms of like talent levels. And I mean, I think Oklahoma State is kind of like going to be middle to like maybe middle high of the Big 12. And Oregon is, again, they're competing for a national title. So I do still think it's two different leagues of teams, and I don't really see that being a real upset threat.
All right. Well, I'm trying to put this in a polite way. Penn State fans basically were sold very high on everything. How we're gonna get the next great coach. We're gonna get Lane Kiffin. We're gonna get even John Summerall. We're gonna get all this. And then all of a sudden, after everybody said no, 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 they were very disappointed that they only landed Matt Campbell. Look, a lot of players left after they fired after they fired the coach, after everything went to hell in a handbasket last year after that Oregon loss. And well, now we have basically a brand new team because hey, Iowa State, all those players went to Penn State. So let's start here. Is Rocco Becht serviceable for what they need right now? I know Penn State wanted higher. They thought, hey, James Franklin's gone. Now we can get a legit quarterback. They had these dreams of all this great stuff. And yes, Rocco Becht is not Julian Sayin, but for what Penn State needs now, is he the best they could have hoped for?
After the whole saga that they went through, um, and however many days it's like 50 something days or whatever it was to find a coach, to basically fall, you know, to basically fall ass backwards into getting Matt Campbell and basically just getting the Iowa State roster to join you, is I think that's a successful a successful offseason for Penn State after all that went down. Specifically on Rocco Becht, yeah, I think he is more than adequate feels like an insult, but I think he is a more than adequate quarterback for winning Penn State some football games this year and at least getting them back to a place of relevancy and being able to uh not be a national embarrassment and losing to the likes of UCLA and Northwestern and like barely even squeaking out, having a tough time with Nevada of all teams. Like they were just so bad last year. Um, yeah, I think Matt Campbell is a great hire. I think Rocco Becht is a very experienced, you know, quality passer. He's not gonna, wow you with an arm. He's not gonna wow you with his legs, but the dude knows how to win football games. The dude knows how to make clutch throws in clutch situations, and I think that's kind of all. I think Penn State fans should be happy with that, and then work towards really building this program up and combining the resources and financial stature and the facilities of Penn State with the ability of Matt Campbell to be able to get the most out of his players and to be able to elevate rosters and win games that it doesn't feel like he should be winning.
Let's start with first the Penn State defense. Jim Knowles is gone. He went to Tennessee, so you know, D'Antonio Lynn, a former All Big Ten cornerback from Penn State, returns. He is. There's a lot of transfers. They brought in UCLA defensive tackle Siale Tawapaki. They brought in, of course, a lot of guys from Iowa State, including Caleb Bacon, Cooper Eblem. They brought in Iowa State safety Marcus Neal, who should captain the secondary here. Ikenna Ezeku, defensive end, defensive tackle Armstrong Dodu, Alexander McPherson. Tony Rojas is back. So again, and Davion Collins is back, but still, when you look at this defense, like what is I guess the hope? Can this defense, at least keep games honest, not let them get blown out by like 38-14, 42-37, or even games like, we gave up 25 points to Iowa. Friggin' Iowa put up 25 points against us.
Yeah, I think this is it's a good defense. I think we've seen how well Matt Campbell and his staff can get the most, particularly out of the secondary. And I think there's some really talented secondary players. They bring over Jeremiah Cooper and Marcus Neal from Iowa State. They already have Darius Dixon, who was a standout freshman corner last year for Penn State. You put him with Audavian Collins, you mentioned, as well as Zion Tracy. Both of them are seniors, so there's some talent in the secondary that I think people should know about and should pay attention to. Um, you mentioned Tony Rojas as well. Him, Caleb Bacon, and Cooper Ebel are three linebackers too. I think they're quality players. As we'll see how D'Anton Lynn kind of comes in and establishes this defensive identity. But we've seen him do good work at USC. I know that it didn't always like show up in USC's games last year that he did a good job, but uh, I do think part of that is just kind of I feel like Lincoln Riley. I don't know if it's a curse or what, but he just can't seem to ever have a good defense on a team that he's coaching. Um, but I think the defense. I don't think it's going to wow anyone. I don't think it's going to stand as among the leagues or the conference's best. Um, but it's a good unit with future potential to build on. They obviously would have loved to have had Chaz Coleman to build up their pass rush with as well, but that's a whole saga in and of itself. But it's a good unit that I think can, they could show up and they might give up a bit more points than I think Penn State fans would want, but I also think they can make some plays and can turn the tide when they need to, and the they'll win, the 28-24 kind of games and the 31-30 kind of games, because they can make a play at the end when some of these other defenses won't be able to.
They have a skill weapons like Chase Sowell, Eskelson are pretty damn good wide receivers. Benjamin Brahmer and Andrew Lapierre, they are excellent tight ends. And Carson Hansen is a just bruising running back who will get Penn State fans, dreaming of the old days with Zonk and all those guys, Larry Johnson. The offensive line, there's a lot of questions. Look, Malachi Goldman, uber talented, freshman. He's now getting a chance, but he is a redshirt freshman left tackle. Uh, Brock Riker was fantastic at Texas State. He's now transferred over and playing the Big Ten. Cooper Cousins will be probably the starting right guard. Anthony Dunco is the only returner at right tackle, and they brought in a transfer Trevor Bird at left guard. Like, this is an offensive line. If you're Rocco Becht, are you going, oh crap, I'm going to have to run a lot and try to just not get killed?
Yeah, I do think we're gonna, this it's gonna be a prove it season for this offensive line. Yeah, Malachi Goodman is very highly touted. And I will not be surprised if, again, he's somebody that we're talking about in 2029 as a, high draft pick at the left tackle spot. Um, Anthony Donko at the other tackle spot is a talented player in his own right as well, and somebody that is going to get NFL love as well. It really, again, we'll see. Unfortunately, I try to support the Big 12 as much as I can, but I can acknowledge that, what worked at Iowa State against Big 12 competition may not work against Big 10 competition, when you're playing, that level of opponent. Now, we'll get into their schedule in a second, but fortunately they miss out on the heavy hitters of the conference. So that might, I think, is going to help them out. But yeah, it really is going to come down to, you know, what you get out of Malachi Goodman being so young, but having so much potential, and Anthony Donko, at the other tackle spot. Can he be the leader of this unit, and be effective in that way? And then the transfers that they're bringing in, are they going to be able to have the success that they had at the Big 12 level, now at the Big 10 level?
So let's get to the schedule because again, this is for how colossally Penn State screwed the pooch and their coaching hire and everything. This could still work out. You look and it's like, all right, the schedule opens up Marshall at Temple, Buffalo are their first three games. Then it's pretty easy openings Big Ten schedule considering Wisconsin at Northwestern, USC at Michigan. That's the big one. But then it's Purdue at Washington, Minnesota, Rutgers at Maryland. Again, Matt Campbell. Many people have said he is one of the best coaches in all of college football when you consider what he's had to work with and what he's done considering the lack of resources at Ames, Iowa. He has a veteran quarterback. He has guys from Iowa State who know how to win. They avoid Oregon and Ohio State and Indiana like the Black Plague. Call me crazy. Knowing Matt Campbell, knowing how he's done this before with Iowa State, and all of a sudden proving like, yeah, we're ranking Iowa State 12th, and then they're like, oh, well, wait a minute, they're tied for first in the Big 12 conference. I can't believe I'm saying this. Could 10-2 be on the schedule considering they outside of Michigan and maybe possibly Washington, all their games are very winnable, or if they're not like USC, they come to Happy Valley.
Oh, I definitely think 10-2 is on the table. I will not be surprised if we get to, we get to November, or maybe even like after the Michigan game, if they win that, and by that point they'd be what, seven, it'd be 6-0, if they run the table by that point and beat Michigan, and they find their way into the top 20, top 15, whatever. And, people are going to be talking about them as a playoff kind of sleeper team. And a large, a large portion of that is going to be this schedule is, I mean, easily the most favorable in that we've talked about so far, and I think in the entire conference. Um, I really do think, like you said, I think it's at Michigan, at Washington are the two worry games. I guess the other one would be at home against USC. Are kind of the three games that stand out as like the losses on this schedule, but like home against Wisconsin, at Northwestern, home against Purdue, home against Minnesota, home against Rutgers, and at Maryland. I mean, that's a 6-0 kind of schedule for them. I mean, they really shouldn't. I don't think they should drop any of those games. And then the other three again, we'll see. But be at home against USC, very winnable. Even I would say at Michigan is a winnable game depending on what how their season is going up to that point. And same with Washington. I would probably project those as losses right now, but is 10-2 on the table? Absolutely. I think 10-2 is on the table.
Well, we're getting down the home stretch here, folks. We've been talking a lot of Big Ten, so this one will be pretty quick because there's not much to talk about. Purdue is just bad. And look, I feel bad for Barry Odom. He's trying, and the hope is that, hey, Ryan Brown is back for year 2 at QB. He nearly left for North Carolina and went, Bill Belichick, hard pass. I'll come back. And they've gotten some transfers, like Jarek Gibson and Femi Ijobi on offense, but are they going to be the worst team in the Big Ten? And if you're Purdue, how much you're looking at this going, there's got to be like hope. We don't know where, but there's got to be hope, or else we might start to be worried about getting kicked out of the Big Ten.
Yeah, no, I think I said before there's two teams that are kind of in the bottom of the barrel rebuilding phase of the Big Ten. Um, Michigan State I think was one, and this is the other. And yeah, man, like I think Barry Odom is a very good coach. I mean, he was obviously at Missouri, for a hot minute, and was at UNLV and kind of helped revitalize that program before Dan Mullen came over. So like he knows what he's doing. He's somebody that I think is you want in this position to try to turn around Purdue. I do just think this program has been left for dead by it's a combination of things. I mean, obviously I don't think the NIL is up to the standard that they would want to compete in the Big Ten. I think they've had, unfortunately, just bad coaching before Barry Odom got there. Ryan Walters was not great for this program. I always think back to, a few years ago when this was a team that had Nick Scorton and Dylan Thieneman on it. And and now you think how, I mean, both of those guys were top 50 picks in the, or Scorton might have actually been like 50 something. But regardless, like both of those were tie draft picks that had Purdue been able to just keep them around and develop them, could have really helped put that program in a better position to recruit and or to attract, guys that want to play in the league. Um, I do think there's some some guys to watch and to be kind of excited about in this team. I like Ian Jeffries, the massive defensive tackle that they've got in the middle. I like Elo Madozi, who was formerly first he was at Army, then he was at Georgia for a minute, and he flashed some nice pass rush juice when he was at Army. He could be a good player for this team. You talked about Ryan Brown. We'll see if he can kind of, uh, you know, improve. He needs to improve if this team has any chance of doing anything in the Big Ten. Um, yeah, it just feels like a lot of unfortunately, it just feels like a lot of guys that are just they would be backups in pretty much, or at least the majority of other Big Ten programs, and they're at Purdue, so they're going to be starters. Um, but yeah, it's tough. It's tough for me to be super optimistic about this team.
They say the schedule's easier, but I gotta ask this question because I don't want to sound hyperbole, but could they go winless? I mean, again, it's like the opening game is Indiana State. All right, they should win that. Then it's Wake Forest at UCLA, Notre Dame at Illinois, Minnesota, Washington both home, then at Penn State, Maryland, at Iowa, Wisconsin, at Indiana. Like again, I have faith in Barry Odom as a coach, but considering they've brought in 29 portal players, they still don't have like anybody on. You look at the skill positions like are even threats. The offensive line is being rebuilt. Um, there's no pass rush. Like, could this get worse before it gets better?
Oh yeah, no, like I mean, I would predict a 2-10, another 2-10. I kind of feel like Indiana State's the one easy win, and then like I think they could maybe, they could beat a Wisconsin. They could beat a Maryland potentially if they're not having a great year. Um, but yeah, I don't see like I think they would lose to. I think they would lose to Wake Forest. I think they would, lose all of these road games that I'm looking at. Um, and Notre Dame should, kick their socks in. Like there's really not a lot of these matchups I'm looking at and being like I could reasonably see Purdue winning again. I think maybe Wisconsin and maybe Maryland are the two that I would say they could win. But even that, even if I gave them both, that's a 3-win season. Um, and it's tough. It's really honestly tough for me to sit here and say, as bad as that sounds, that they should fire Barry Odom because I just don't. Who's gonna do it? Who would do better? Like who would realistically do better with this roster in this situation and this schedule? I don't, I don't think so. I really don't. I so yeah, I don't have high hopes, but I also don't. I think this is just kind of what Purdue is right now, and they have to hope that they get more investment in the NIL and they can maybe get some of these younger guys on this roster to take a step and to really like show some good development. Again, like if you can get Ryan Brown to kind of take a step up and be it's in the top half of Big Ten quarterbacks. That could be a big thing for your team. If you can get some production on the D line, that could be a big thing for your program as well. But yeah, I'm grasping at straws here.
That's so. Let's go to a team that has hope because we were getting depressed. I'm like, all right, we're getting really depressed here. So UCLA, there's now talk of hope. Bob Chesney has come in. They went out. They got the former Holy Cross head coach, who many call one of the best small school coaches, who deserves it. And he's trying to do what Kurt Signetti did. And hey, we're gonna just hit the ground running, and we're gonna just do this overnight. Nico Iamaleava is back at quarterback. He did not transfer, which for many people at UCLA was a huge win. Um, you look and they brought in a ton of transfers. Stud running back Wayne Knight from James Madison University is there, along with Anthony Woods, who returned. They went to the transfer portal and brought in left tackle Jordan Davis, right tackle Hall Schmidt to come back with Eugene Brooks, Sam Yoon. Wide receiver room is all transfers, whether it's Leland Smith, Brian Rowe, Landon Ellis, even Aiden Mizzelli here. Come and look, Ellis joined Chesney from James Madison. Rowe and Ian Samaj Morgan are coming from South Carolina and Michigan. Is there hope right now that just after last year they can just make Nico look like a professional, quarterback and not a guy who last year looked like, oh my god, I'm gonna get killed. I'm running around, with the chicken with my head cut off because I have nobody.
Oh yeah, I know the Kurt Signetti comparison is probably a little too easy to make. Both former Holy Cross coaches that go to a struggling Power Five program and then, immediately inject them with new life and start a crazy turnaround. Um, but I really from what I have seen from Bob Chesney and the players that I think he's brought in, I I'm not going to go so far as to say they'll be like the next Indiana necessarily, but I think this can absolutely be a team that we're quote unquote surprised wins 8 games, 8 or 9 games, and has a really good season. I listen. I know Nico Yamaliava is easy to crap on, and he had that whole the whole Tennessee debacle that was, and that whole situation, whatever. But like at the end of the day, there's a reason this guy was a 5 star. There's a reason this guy is seen as just one of the most gifted quarterbacks in college football right now. His arm and athleticism combination is really not matched by many quarterbacks right now in the game. And I think he, to his credit, was put in a horrific situation last year in terms of supporting cast and overall just the overall talent of the team and how they played in most of those games, especially before Deshaun Foster was fired mid-season, and then they kind of had some life when they made Neuheisel the interim, but then even that kind of lost steam after a couple games. So I still think Yamaliov is insanely talented. I think you're bringing in really good players, both from Holy Cross and James Madison. Sahir West is a defensive end that we are going to need to pay attention to. He was a menace last year at James Madison, and if he plays like he did at James Madison in the Big Ten, this is someone that's going to absolutely be on NFL radars. Um, I like the additions that you mentioned Jordan Davis, the left tackle. He was at South Alabama last year and is one of the better pass blockers in the game in college football that UCLA could have added. Wayne Knight is an explosive running back. Him and Anthony Woods is going to be a really fun running back duo uh, behind Iamaleava. Um, I mentioned Sahir West. They've also got Aiden Gabera on the other side of the defensive line. Samuel Mastigo from Oklahoma. He's going to play middle linebacker for them. He's a really athletic player in the second level. And then in the secondary, Scooter Jackson, Roderick Pleasant, DJ Barksdale is a nice 3-man corner tandem to have. Uh, that they can make some plays. They've got some feistiness. I expect this UCLA team again. I don't think 9 wins is probably like the ceiling, but I don't think 8 wins like isn't a an unreasonable expectation, especially when you look at like their schedule and who they have to play this year.
I guess here's the X Factor question: is Bob Chesney a good cultural fit for UCLA? I'm not questioning his credit, his coaching as a coach. He can do that. It's a different attitude out in California. I mean, again, you're trying to recruit in the inner cities. You're trying to recruit in the West Coast. It's you know, they usually it's more guys who are personable, flashy. That's why Lincoln Riley, works well. That's why even Dane Lanning works well. They're personable guys. They are fun loving. They also come from big schools. UCLA doesn't have that. Chesney's a New Englander, a lot like Kirk Cignetti, who's more, you know, I'd say reserved compared to Lanning and Riley. So again, can he get, this is more not for just this year, but going forward, can he get guys who he's gonna have to compete, across the street from USC, with Oregon, with Washington, with all these teams that have more money, more say investment, and he's gonna do this hitting the ground running because people in USC, UCLA are getting frustrated. Like, hey, remember we used to be a big, powerful football program? What the hell happened to us?
Yeah, look, at the end of the day, like the UCLA is a very prestigious institution. They've got, I mean, obviously you're in Los Angeles. You've got the luxury of being in Southern California at your disposal. And not to make the Cignetti comparison again, but yeah, when he signs on to Indiana, he's got Ohio State and he's got Michigan and he's got, to a lesser extent, he's got Illinois. And, he's got other schools around him that he has to compete against. And, he proved again in the 2 years he's been there, as long as he has his guys and can instill his culture and his identity, then it doesn't really matter. Yeah, I would call Bob Chesney to UCLA a little more unconventional. I remember when he was hired, when that was announced, I was very surprised. I remember Bob Chesney had been talked about as a Penn State candidate, and I think that would have made a ton of sense, if Penn State had gone in that direction. Obviously they did, but UCLA didn't really feel like a Bob Chesney destination just because he'd been an East Coast guy for his entire coaching career up to that point. But again, in this era of college football, as long as you have the right leader who can get the most out of his guys, can utilize the transfer portal, and can also develop players, I think those are the things that matter most. And everything I've seen and heard up to this point is that Bob Chesney is very good at doing that. And I expect UCLA to really have the most relevant years of their football program that they've had in quite some time, at least the last decade.
So, what's realistic expectations? I mean, they have one of the more tougher non-schedule games, and starts off at Cal. That's gonna be fun. San Diego State then comes to town. It's easier for the first two Big Ten games in that they get Purdue and at Maryland, then at Oregon, Wisconsin, Michigan State, Nevada, at Minnesota, Illinois, at Michigan, then cross rival USC. Again, I mean, what should be realistic? Because I know there's going to be people going, "Oh, this is going to be a horrible season." And there's people going, "Hey, they could surprise." Like, what is reasonable if you're a UCLA fan going, "Hey, let's 5, 6 wins. All right, we're happy. We're not tickled pink, but hey, it's better than what we were expecting."
Yeah, look, I think 5, 6 wins, and you look good and you look competent. Is a perfectly fine season. I would have no problem with that. I I mean, I said it before. I don't think 8 wins is out of the question. I think Oregon is obviously a loss. I think Michigan is probably a loss. At Cal is it's a tough week one matchup, for sure. And I think the world of JKS. I think he's incredibly talented. And USC at the end of the year is definitely going to be a tough game as well. But if one of those is a win, and and then after that, I think every single other game is a very winnable game. If they, again, if they get the most out of Nico and he starts to actually like really, play like the player that we've fantasized that he could be now for the past couple seasons. And if they get some production out of their defense, I mentioned Sahir West. If he plays like the kind of pass rusher that I think he could potentially develop into, and the secondary, elevates and plays well as well. I I really don't think 8 wins is like a crazy thing, but like you said, I think 5, 6 wins, but you look competitive most of the season is a perfectly fine first year for Chesney and company.
So let's get to USC first, because they're the team I'm looking at going, all right, hey, wait a minute. Could this be the year? Maybe not, but hey, you don't want to write them off because, again, they have the best combination they've had in a long time over there in terms of the entire offensive line is returned. It led by Elijah Page at right tackle, Justin Tanao at right tackle. We talked earlier. We mentioned Jade Mayava. He is maybe the nation's most efficient quarterback coming back. He last year finished fifth nationally in passing yards and 3,711 yards and second in QBR, 89.9. They have, even with losing Jacoby Lane and Makai Lemon to the NFL, which are huge, they still bring back Tanook Hines. Terrell Anderson transfers in from NC State. Feaster and Mark Bowman are elite level recruits. The running game alone, Wayman Jordan, King Miller can just run on teams like. You look, could this be maybe the best offense in terms of everything right now with health that Lincoln Riley has had since Caleb Williams was there.
If Jane Mayava takes the kind of step that I think he can, yeah, yeah, it absolutely can be. Um, I do, I really think Jaden Mayava is, pound for pound, right up there with Arch and Dante Moore in terms of just pure talent and the throws that he can make, the effortlessness in which he can make throws, and the physical talent that he has, and the clutch ability that he demonstrated in several games last year. And yes, he absolutely has his moments where it looks awful, and you hate you hate watching him play sometimes. But I if he can just find the consistency, and find the consistent accuracy, not sail his throws. I just think he really is right up there with the best in college football in terms of just talent level for quarterbacks. Um, Obviously, losing both Mekhi Lemon and Jacoby Lane is tough for this receiving core, but Tanu Kynes is very talented. He even, stood out as a freshman last year. Terrell Anderson is a nice addition from NC State, as their sort of X receiver. You mentioned Waymon Jordan as well. He's a really good running back, and was really, I thought he looked really good before he got hurt. So someone that, if he could stay healthy, can be a difference maker out of the backfield. Mark Bowman is a top tight end recruit, so he can be a difference maker as a freshman as well. And look, man, you could say what you want about Lincoln Riley. I just criticized him not long ago about not having a defense, but the man knows how to call plays. The man knows how to develop quarterbacks. That's been proven for years now. So I could still believe that just from an offensive standpoint, US should be very talented. I think the question with USC, as it feels like it always is what's going on the other side of the ball.
Which we're going to get to right now. So, yes, USC could, basically couldn't stop a cold if it tried last year, giving up 34 points to Illinois, 34 against Notre Dame, 42 against Oregon. Oh yeah, they gave up 30 to TCU in a bowl game, and TCU didn't even have Josh Hoover. Yeah, that was not good. So Gary Patterson, Hall of Fame football coach from TCU, has now taken over the defense. They brought in a lot of transfers from John Tennis Williams from Iowa State. Uh, Zariah Fisher from Penn State. Hey, they got they had two 5-star recruits coming in this year. Luke Waffle and Jamion Winfield, both 5 stars at edge and defensive line. They return. They got Cameron Crawford is returning along with Marcellus Williams and Christian Pierce. And Kennedy Urlacher is now a starting safety. So can they just play decent defense? I'm not asking for miracles if you're a USC fan. I'm not asking for you guys to start being like, oh yeah, Indiana defense, we'll shut teams down. Just like, can they limit teams to 24 points per game? Not even 30, just 24 points per game. Is that feasible for a USC defense, which never seems to do that?
Yeah, and what's sad is that's honestly probably all they would need. Like they could just do that and they would be, I think they would be a playoff team. I will say I think the hope that if you're a USC fan, I think the hope that you have is, you bring in Gary Patterson, former TCU head coach, who is, has to be one of the best just pure defensive minds in college football in the last 20-ish years or whatever. Um, he knows how to coach and knows how to scheme up some concepts and is able to put guys in a position to make plays on the ball and to create turnovers. So the hope has to be that he can take this this defense, and I love the addition of Jontez Williams from Iowa State. He was one of my favorite corners before he got hurt, but if he's healthy, I absolutely think he can go right back to creating turnovers. Um, the defensive line still has talent. You mentioned Zariah Fisher coming over from Penn State. Cameron Crawford is probably their best defensive end player, and he's going to be a difference maker. You got Braylon Shelby on the other side. You got G.D. Abasiri and Jakeem Stewart in the middle. Solid defensive tackles. I Kennedy Urlacher too, coming over from Notre Dame, is a nice safety player to have. So look, the defense again, as I feel like it's every year, they have talent. It's never a question of talent and potential. It always just comes down to execution on the football field, and for one reason or another, it just doesn't ever seem to work out. I think Gary Patterson is great and can do something with this crop of players. Can it be enough to just to put the offense in a position to win football games without having to score 30, 35 points a game? It can be, but I can't. I feel like I say that every year and then I get kicked in the nuts because USC can't stop anything, and then they wind up going like 8-4, 9-3, whatever, and they're always just a team of what if as opposed to like actually finally getting there. So I really want to believe in this USC team, but I also just feel like I always get punished when I do. So I'm gonna reserve my high hopes, but I do think this team has a lot of talent on it.
It sounds weird saying this, but is Lincoln Riley sort of on the hot seat? I don't mean getting fired, but again, this is like the year where they're like, all right, look, schedule breaks a little bit for them in terms of it starts easy. San Jose State, Fresno State, Louisiana, at Rutgers. All right, you're 4-0. And then Oregon comes to town. Washington comes to town. All right, well, it's not ideal, but hey, they're coming to town. At Penn State, it's not really good. At Wisconsin, they should be able to win that. And then Ohio State, October 31st. November, we have a break in between at Indiana, then Maryland, at UCLA. Again, as you said, if they can just keep defense, other offenses just to under 24 points, is it possible they could finish like, 10-3, maybe even 11-2, and all of a sudden this is a team where it's like this is finally the year, or is there a chance where it's Again, they finish 8-5, and we're going, God damn it! They put up 35 points, and they give up 36 points. What is more realistic with this schedule?
What's realistic is probably the latter. Again, if I had to just bet on it with my common sense and what history tells me, and all and what I think of these other teams, I realistically think they're going to get to 10 wins. Uh, I do think on the what exactly is Lincoln Riley's level of hot seat question. I think he has to win one of, not all three. He has to win one of Oregon, Ohio State, or Indiana. I think he has to win one of those games. If he loses all three of those games, presumably loses one more, whether that's at Penn State or at UCLA, or versus Washington, whatever it is. But presumably, if he goes 0-3 against the three top dogs of the conference, and then loses one more, and then winds up going 8-4, or 9-4 if they win a ball game, whatever. I think they're. Would I say he gets fired? Maybe not, but like the hot seat's gonna get hotter because we can't sit here every day and do Groundhog's Day where it just again it feels like the same conversation of offense was great, they had a great quarterback, they could move the ball, they could score, but they couldn't get a defense. And unfortunately, in this conference, in the Big Ten, you have to be able to play defense to play meaningful football in January. Like that's just how that's how this works. Like you can't just rely on again just trying to outscore everybody and hoping every game gets into a shootout. Now, I will say if they can run, if they can beat all the teams that they should beat or at least are comparable to, and then beat one of Oregon, Ohio State, or Indiana, um, especially too, like you have Ohio State, then you have a bye, and then you get Indiana. So you actually have an extra week to prep for Indiana. Plus, you have Oregon and Ohio State both at home. So it's as advantageous to you as you could possibly have it. So if you win one of those games at least and run the table on all the other teams besides those other two, you finish 10-2. You're probably it would maybe depend if you're going to make the playoff or not, but like you're in the conversation for sure as a 10-2 team. So like if you make the playoff in that way, then yeah, then I think that's a very successful season. And then you see where they go from there. But making the playoff has to be the goal. And if they don't do that, it's gonna just inherently feel, I think, like another missed opportunity.
Washington Huskies. All right. Well, it was like a lot of teams. Off season was a little bit chaotic. Hey, they almost lost Demond Williams Jr. to LSU, but in a lawsuit and threats of basically just sinking everything and the kitchen sink made him go. I really like Washington here at Husky Stadium, so he is back. The Gonvo is Denzel Boston, Jonah Cohen, but still the offensive line has 4/5 returning. Cody Green, the 5-star recruit, will be starting at possibly left tackle, depending on if Drew Asparati decides, maybe I'll flip flop here. Jordan Washington looks pretty good. Desmond Roback is back. Can the Huskies, turn the corner? If you were, putting money on it, do you look at Demond Williams Jr. and go, you know what? This will be the year he takes the big step. This is where Jed Fish is gonna basically make him into possibly like a real legit NFL caliber quarterback.
Yeah, so we sort of waited to the end here to get to my. I don't know, maybe it's not a bold prediction, but if I had to bet on one Big Ten team to win 10 games, and not including the obvious Oregon, Ohio State, Indiana, I think it might be Washington. I really think highly of this team. I think Jed Fish is a really good coach and has really done a great job at that program. I think Demond Williams while I'm not high on him from an NFL draft perspective, I think he is a playmaker at the quarterback position and could absolutely become a college football star with the way that he's able to just sling the ball around and can really make explosive plays both as a runner and a thrower. Um, I think he's got weapons in Christian Moss, who they just got from the in the transfer portal from Kennesaw State. Desmond Roebuck, who was a quality freshman last year. I think he had like 7 touchdowns. Um, so he how productive and he can build on that for another big season. And then on the offensive line, you mentioned like Cody Green is a very highly touted left tackle prospect. That hopefully starting a true freshman is always daunting, but hopefully he can hold up. And then they've got experience in guys like Landon Hatchett, Drew Azzapardi, on the other side as well. And then you look at the defense. Like I like Elenius Davis in the middle there. I like Jacob Lane on off the edge. Um, I think they've got talent in the secondary. I'm a big fan of Alex McLaughlin, the safety, who was a former, I believe he was at no, Northern Arizona. Sorry. He was at Northern Arizona, started his career, came over to Washington, and he's just been a playmaker. Um, they brought in Emmanuel Carnley at corner. Like there are good players, talented players on both sides of the ball, and I think there is room for this team to take that step. Am I going to sit here and say like, they're going to make a national title run? No, I'm not going to say that. But could I see them being the sneaky Big Ten team that maybe sneaks into the playoff as the 12th or the 11th team, and we're maybe a little surprised when that happens, but they take advantage of. I think overall the schedule isn't too bad. It's a little rough at the end, but it's not too bad of a schedule, and they've got some pieces and they've got good coaching. I like Washington, and I don't think 10 wins is unreasonable.
Let's talk about the defense quickly here because there's a lot of youth. It's you're looking at it, and it's there's people I know in the college football world who say, "Hey, Dylan Robinson has first round traits. He is going to be starting as a true sophomore." You have true freshman Derek Coleman Brusa, who one of their top recruits, 4-star recruit they got. He will be on the defensive line along with Za'Darius Rainey Sale, with Rashawn Clark and the linebacker spots, with Raylan Dillard Allen at safety. Again, we mentioned earlier, Emmanuel Carney, Virginia transfer. You got Rylan Dillard Allen, the freshman All American, but it's still. Can this secondary, I guess, grow up? Where last year they took their lumps against Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon. Can this be the year where you're looking at going, all right, last year you were learning. This year it's like, all right, you're now ready to compete against the top teams.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely the cause for pause, if you will, in terms of like what the ceiling is for Washington. It's a very super young secondary. I mentioned Alex McLaughlin. I think he's kind of going to need to be the leader of that unit, and as the senior, as the guy that's been there, and as the guy that's been making plays for a few seasons now at multiple levels of college football. I think they're going to lean on him to be again that leader and that voice of the secondary. I like Carnley. I think he's a really nice addition at that outside corner spot. And yeah, they've got young talent. You mentioned Dylan Robinson uh, as their other boundary guy, and Rashawn Clark at their nickel. So I do think they can take that step. I would they thankfully they don't play Ohio State, spoiler, but so they don't have to deal with Jeremiah Smith and Chris Henry necessarily. But they are going to have probably a tough time in a couple of these matchups with some of the more threatening wide receiver tandems that they'll face. So again, I think that is a a concern to have, but uh, in those situations, I think you'd kind of hope too that like the offense can put points on the board, which I think they can.
It's kind of, again, you're high on them because you said, hey, we could get 10 wins. And it's, again, it's, the non-conference pretty easy. It's Washington State, Utah State, East Washington. They start the Big Ten, Minnesota at home, then at USC, Iowa at home, at Purdue, at Nebraska. It's those final four games. You're like, ugh, all right, well, we're not going to panic, but it's the litmus test. It's November 7th, Penn State. November 14th, a little bit easier at Michigan State. Then back to back, Indiana, November 21st, and then at Oregon, November 28th. I know you and a lot of people go, this is going to be the year. Desmond, Damon Williams Jr. is going to turn it around. Hey, this defense is coming alive. Hey, Jed Fish is a damn good coach. He's got them ready. Can they survive November, though? I mean, again, Penn State, Indiana, at Oregon. There's a good chance they lose all three of those games. Two of them, they get doors blown off. So, what is, I guess, for you, like, all right, I'm going to like realistic expectations. You're not expecting them to run the whole table, but I mean, for Washington, what would be the pie in the sky / realistic record of, let's say, November?
Yeah, look, I think if you, so I think if you're a Washington fan, I think your hope is they can run the table to Indiana. I think that's like the optimistic look at how this season could go, and that's not, that's not a gimme. I think like at USC is a tough, tough one to win. The Penn State game I think is probably their toughest home game that they've got on the table. But I don't think that's out of the question. And so then you would hope that you can at least be competitive with Indiana and Oregon, even if both are losses, and you can make a case to the playoff committee that, hey, look, those are two losses, but those two teams are national title contenders in and of themselves, and so therefore we would also potentially deserve a spot. Um, you know, do I think that's gonna happen? It's tough. I won't act like it's not, but I'm bought in, and I think Washington is one of the teams that has a legit home field advantage. Part of that is geography. Um, but I think they have a legit home field advantage in this conference. And, you know, listen, would I rule out that they catch Indiana napping potentially? I wouldn't rule it out. I wouldn't pick it, but I wouldn't rule it out either. Um, so again, I think the hope is that they can run the table before they get those two games, and then they can at least look competitive in losses in both of those high profile matchups.
All right, let's talk the final two teams here. First off, it's Rutgers. It is going to be a lot, and yes, I know this is right now. It's a different picture, but let's start off here with, is Greg Schiano basically in no man's land? I mean, the last year we thought, okay, they might be able to sneak in. They were 5-6 going into the final game at Penn State, and they lose 36-40. And look, he loses. He has to replace starting quarterback Ethan Kalamakis. He has to replace uh, NFL draft, wide receiver Ian. He has to replace Ian Strong, who transferred to Cal. DT Sheffield graduated. They were able to retain, Antoine Raymond, and they were able to retain, the other stud, their other talented, playmaker KJ Duff. But could this be maybe the worst offense in the entire Big Ten, considering you're not sure who the quarterback is between Dylan Lonergan and AJ Sarras, and you're still not sure about half the offensive line, which three-fifths have never started a college game.
I'm no, I don't think they're the worst offense in the conference, and I don't even think they're sniffing, the bottom of the barrel. Like I think Purdue is much more problematic. I think I think Michigan State is more problematic. Um, even like Northwestern, I guess, has some upside with Childs, but I, I, first of all, I mean, they've got KJ Duff, they've got Antoine Raymond. Those are two guys that are gonna get serious NFL looks, and they are very talented. And yes, losing Ian Strong is not ideal by any means. And they do have questions up front, certainly, just in terms of the what they're getting on the offensive line in terms of starts. However, I will say all of their starters are seniors, I believe, except for Mashoud Giwa, their left tackle. So, even in maybe not a ton of starts, but they are experienced and have been developing with Shiano and his staff. Look, quarterback is obviously always important too. You're always, you need to get that position sorted and need to have trust in whoever they decide is going to be the starter. Lonergan last year at Boston College didn't really, it was a mixed bag, we'll say, and I don't think that was all his fault necessarily. He wasn't in a great situation by any means at Boston College, but I don't really think you're getting a great starter with him, and Sarasi is unproven as well. So look, I think there's talent on this offense, and I think that eventually the sort of just the sheer just talent and playmaking ability of, again, like KJ Duff and Antoine Raymond will be able to shine through. And listen, the Rutgers is another one of these teams that's always just, they're built on physicality, and they're built on just running you over with their big blockers, and they'll take the fight to anybody, and it's usually able to win them some football games. So that's kind of the expectation I would have. I feel that they're a middle of the pack team at best, probably, but I think they can surprise people if they get some surprise at the quarterback position, because I think there is other talent on this team.
Their defense last year was probably the worst ever in Rutgers history in the Big Ten era. Their defense was so bad. They gave the fewest points they gave up were 20 to Maryland. They gave up 24 to Purdue, and then they got their doors blown off, like 42 to at Ohio State, 40 to a Penn State team at the end of a year, 56 to Oregon, 35 to Illinois. Like, they couldn't stop anybody, literally. So what does Shiano do? He fires his defensive coordinators, replaces them with South Dakota's head coach Travis Johnson. They brought in a litany of transfers from Malachi Davis, Rondo Porter, Jadon Burnett, Doug Blue Eli. Doug Blue Eli is the only returner at the front four. Moses Walker, Abraham Wright, and Kaj Sanders are the returning starters. They've also brought in two new corners in Zamir Dawad and Kevin Humes. Can this defense just play defense? I mean, I'm not. If we said to UC, hey, just prevent teams from scoring, more than 24 points. If you're Rutgers, can this defense just get like 5 sacks from any defensive player? Anybody? We'll take anything, even if it's 5.5. They haven't had that in a long time. So, can this defense? It can't get worse, can it?
Yeah, well, the hope is no. But no, look, you mentioned two guys, Malachi Davis and Jadon Burnett. Both of them had 5.5, or in Burnett's case, 6.5 sacks last year. So if at least one of them can replicate that and get you 6 sacks in a Big Ten as a Big Ten pass rusher, you'd have to be, pretty excited about that. Um, there, I will say too, they brought in Mikey Munn, who's a corner at South Dakota with Travis Johansson, and he was really one of the best corners in the FCS last year, in terms of forcing completions. So he's someone that I think they'll hope to see is someone that can be a difference maker in their secondary. Um, yeah, look, you're right though. It is defense. It's can they create pressure up front, and can they cover it up on the back end? They've had talent on defense, and they've had a couple corners drafted in recent years, and some good players, but they just haven't been able to consistently hold up, especially when they've gone against the top teams in the conference. Um, do I expect a huge change in that? Not necessarily. Um, but again, I maybe now with a new defensive coordinator, and this is the second team that we're talking about now that's hired an FCS head coach to now be their defensive coordinator. So we'll see if that's a recipe for success. But I don't have, yeah, I again, I middle of the pack is my expectation for this team, and I don't expect the defense to light the world on fire.
Greg Schiano is a good coach. That's not in debate. But like we talked with Mike Loxley, like we talked with Barry Odom, is this just a no-win situation? It's Rutgers in the Big Ten. It's last year they were hoping to make it just to a bowl game. They went 5-7. Now the schedule is, yeah, the non-conference is pretty easy. It's UMass at BC, Howard, but then they start off, it's gangbusters. USC September 19th, Indiana October 3rd, at Maryland, at Northwestern. Not bad, but still not the greatest. When your two most winnable games are on the road, then Michigan at Wisconsin, Nebraska at Penn State, Michigan State. Like, if he doesn't get to 6 wins, does Rutgers move on from him?
It's a conversation. I think. I mean, just purely from a schedule standpoint, this has to be another one of the easier ones, right? You don't have Ohio State, and you don't have Oregon. And you get Indiana at home. That's probably still a loss anyway. But there are multiple winnable football games on the schedule. There's multiple, you know, there's enough here that I think you could get above 500, if at all, if it goes right for you, and you can take advantage of playing some of these not as great Big Ten teams. Um, if he does finish 4-8, 5-7, again, I think it is a conversation, and I know Greg Schiano. I mean, Greg Schiano's been coaching there. This is his second stint there, but he'd been there for so long prior to that, and then obviously went to the NFL and did that whole thing. Um, but look, Greg Schiano's probably the best coach in the school's history. So it's not easy to let him go necessarily, but it really just does depend on how much the program and the boosters and all of them want to invest in this football program and want it to compete with the upper echelons of the Big Ten.
All right, well, we end this with the final team, and like the South Park member berries. Remember when Luke Fickle was a hot trot coach at University of Cincinnati, and everybody was excited about him taking on Wisconsin, turning them around? Yeah, well, if you don't, it did happen. People were shocked he got brought back, and look, he is. Wisconsin is hoping this is finally that he hits the transfer portal, that he gets everything in gear. We'll start with, and for them, the defense. The good news is they returned Cooper Catalano and Mason Poza, who were their big two sophomore standouts. They're moving Poza more to pass rush position. They're hoping to get some pass rush with him. They transfers, Gore secondary from Marvin Burks Jr. of Missouri, Kai Bates, Eric Fletcher Jr., Javon Robinson at cornerback. They brought in Hammond Russell the fourth and Junior Pasea at defensive line. Again, they've made the effort to be a transfer portal team because they understand that's part of the goal. Do they have enough talent though on defense? I mean, when you look at this Wisconsin Badger defense, did they improve at all? In terms of getting more Big Ten players in for this season.
Eh, I mean, no, I don't think so. I look, I like Javon Robinson. He's sort of the standout for me. I thought he played really well at Arizona State last year, and I think he can be a good corner. Um, and I think Junior Poyser is a intriguing player from Buffalo. Um, I think he had like 5 sacks last year. So, I like some of the players, but overall, man, I'm just not. I i- if we're gonna say who is the Big Ten coach most likely to get fired before November, I think it's gonna be Luke Fickell. I just don't. I don't see the path. I don't see the upside with the roster. I don't see. I just don't see him competing against the. Yeah, I don't even see him really competing against the sort of upper teams like the Illinois and the Minnesotas and the USCs of the world. I don't think this roster's very good, and I know they've brought in new coaches to try to inject some life into the coaching staff and into this roster, but I'm just not. I have very low expectations for Wisconsin, and I think rock bottom is coming. It's coming soon, and I'm not particularly hopeful.
They had the worst offense last year. I mean, literally, they scored 20 points or more twice. Once against Middle Tennessee, and then once in their upset win against Illinois, 27. They got shut out twice. They only scored 7 points twice, 3 times. They scored less than 14 points another three times here. I mean, they were so bad it was comical. So they brought in Iowa State running back Abu Sama III and USC back Brian Jackson. They brought in Sun Belt Offensive Player of the Year Colton Joseph, who was a stud at Old Dominion. They returned Chris Brooks Jr. They brought in transfers Jalen Domino, Shamar Rigby, and Malachi Coleman for the offense. PJ Wilkins is the new left tackle transfer. Can they score more points? I mean, again, they scored 81 points in 9 conference games. Can they finally break that? I mean, can they be more than just anemic?
I mean, they can. Am I gonna like bet on it? I'm not really sure. I think Colton Joseph is a very dynamic, exciting quarterback. We people forget how they had Indiana on the ropes there in that first quarter when he ran. I forget how long the touchdown was, but he had that big play touchdown against the Hoosiers, and we all thought that it was the end of the Signetti era, and then it obviously was not. But I think Colton Joseph is a fun quarterback to have and a quality quarterback to have to try to give some juice to your offense. Abusama, I think, is a quality running back as well. I like them at Iowa State, and sort of their rotation. We'll see now if he does take on more of a lead role. Um, And I'm very intrigued by PJ Wilkins. I believe he's the nephew of Dominique Wilkins, Hall of Fame basketball player. Um, and transfers in from Ole Miss. He was a guard, and now he's been converted to left tackle because of just his sheer size that he brings to the table and his length. So I am very intrigued by him if he plays well against Big Ten competition. Um, but again, just overall, I don't think I don't think the receiving core is really anything serious to write home about. Um, it's a lot of guys that really didn't either just didn't have a lot of production and or playing time last year. Um, and the offensive line overall is very unproven. I think they've got three sophomores starting there as of now for this upcoming season. So it's a young unit. Um, but in the Big Ten conference, when you're Luke Fickell and your job is riding on this season, I just again I worry about what not even the whole season. I worry about what the first 7, 8 weeks is going to look like for you.
They start the season versus Notre Dame at Green Bay, Wisconsin. Gets a bit easier with Western Illinois, Eastern Michigan, then at Penn State, Michigan State at home, at UCLA, USC, at Iowa, Rutgers at Maryland, Purdue, Minnesota. They avoid Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon. So again, if they don't get 6 wins, is Luke Fickell fired? Hell, if they don't win, if they don't split between, Penn State, at UCLA, USC, and at Iowa, does Luke Fickell get fired?
Uh yes. I think they have to. I think they have to have. I'm just trying to math it because like they're not going to beat Notre Dame, but like whatever. Then they'll beat the two non-Big Ten schools. I think they have to win. They have to win. I guess I don't know. I want to say 3 of those 5 games before November, but I mean those are tough games. But I do just kind of feel like they're going to be looking for a reason to get rid of him, right? Like this is again, I think he's on the thinnest ice of any Big Ten coach, arguably of any coach even in college football. And in theory, like yeah, we could sit here and say like at Penn State is a tough matchup, at UCLA is a tough matchup, and at Iowa is a tough matchup, and at home versus USC is a tough matchup. All of those we could say are tough matchups, but in theory, you should have this program at a place where you could win these games because you've been there now for so long, but you don't have it as to where we think you can win these games. And so if those are the results and you lose a majority of those games, I think you have proven that you haven't gotten this program to where it needs to be. So yeah, if he has if he has 4 or less wins by the time we get to November, I probably would probably say that he's gone.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I give you from a draft professors who breaks down everything, and anything here. I give you it's Anthony Russo. So, Anthony, before we let you go, where can fans check you out at? Where is the Substack? Where is the Twitter? Is there a YouTube channel? What do you have coming up for the next couple of days and weeks for you on your channel and network?
Yeah, so I'm working on my final top 200 big board for 2027 NFL Draft Summer Scouting. That'll be out. The college football season starts in a couple weeks, so the goal is to have that out before the college football season starts, whenever that is. Um, so you can find me on X at Anthony_Russo97. You can find my Substack on my X page and in my X bio, where all my NFL draft, college football, and NFL content and articles live. Um, I post, draft cut-ups as well of prospects that I watch and I like. And you can find me on the Draft Professor podcast, usually every Sunday night, talking about Lately we've been doing team previews heading into this. Once the season starts, I'm not exactly sure what we're gonna do, but it will be NFL draft related at the very least. So, yeah, you can find me there, and you can find me on the interwebs as well.
Anthony Russo, ladies and gentlemen, once again, always on a pleasure to have you on the show. We come back. We got a lot more going on here, only on Last Call. Last Call, the alcohol, only on the Last Call podcast.com.